I hereby call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, June 26, 2024. And could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Pelletier?
Here.
Commissioner Marhol?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Clarkson?
Here.
Commissioner Matthews?
Here.
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
Chairperson Hennigan.
Here. We have quorum. Also in attendance is our village attorney. I'd like to extend a welcome to our newest Plan Commission member, Kelly Clarkson, who is joining us for her first meeting tonight. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes for April 24th, 2024?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Does anyone have any changes to the minutes? Hearing none. Ann, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Marhol?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan.
Aye. Motion's approved. Is there anyone present who would like to speak during this time about an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay. In that case, we can move on to the village board update. Ann?
Thank you. President Pollock asked me to share this message with you, and I'll just read what he sent to me. It's a little bit lengthy, but I'll try to read slowly, and if you'd like the text at a later date, please let me know. At the June 6th board meeting, by a vote of 4-1, the board approved a major amendment to the site plan for 2710 Harlem Avenue, thus eliminating the requirement to block access from the from the parking lot to the alley. Given the PZC recommendation to deny the amendment, I would like to provide the following summary of the board's discussion. New information was provided to the board that was not available at the time of the PZC meeting. Specifically, recent traffic counts on Berkeley showed that current traffic levels, with access between the alley and the parking lot, are generally equal to or lower than other residential streets in Riverside. This was an indication to the board that blocking access to the alley to prevent traffic on Berkeley was not necessary, nor was it justified. The neighboring property is seeking a permit to replace their border fence with a 6-foot-tall screening fence. At the time of the PZC hearing, staff had not approved that permit, and it had not been determined whether a 6-foot fence would be permitted. After the PZC hearing and before the board meeting, staff determined that the property owner could erect a 6-foot fence adjacent to the alley. Thus, they are able to provide screening of headlights, noise, etc. The board also discussed the fact that the commercial property in question has historically had access to the alley. The dry cleaners depended on the alley for egress from their drive-through window, for example. There did not appear to be any significant changes to the property that would mandate removing that access. Blocking access to the alley significantly compromises traffic circulation on the commercial property, particularly for the parallel parking spaces adjacent to the commercial building. President Pollock states he acknowledges that individual trustees likely weighed each of these discussion points differently. He said, I know that the board does not take lightly any decision that they make that is contrary to a recommendation from one of our commissions, boards, or committees. That is why I believe it is important to provide an explanation. That's all I have for you.
All right, we have 5 items for review under new business this evening. They'll be taken in the order that they are listed on the agenda. The first item is PZ 24-0003, a variation at 162 Northgate Road to allow a 12-foot, 8-inch wide driveway. This is the public hearing to consider a variation request to allow the entire length of a 31-foot, 7-inch long driveway, providing access to an attached garage to be widened to 12 feet, 8 inches wide. Petitioner is Christopher Begbie. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on June 5th, 2024, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
I move to accept the exhibits.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Ann, would you like to present first, or would you like the petitioner?
Yeah, I'll start off.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. The petitioner is requesting a variation to allow his driveway to remain at 12 feet 8 inches wide. He's also separately requesting an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act to allow his driveway to remain at that width. The documents related to the ADA request were sent to members of the commission prior to the public hearing. And so I'll just take a look at the property first before going through some of my other materials. In 2018, this is a photo of the property, and you can see here the location and the width of the driveway, which was unchanged until earlier this year. So you can see it kind of goes through half of this sidewall.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it not up there?
Correct.
Sorry about that. Let me see if I can't fix that issue. All right. Is that helpful? There we got it. All right. Now, you can actually see the property. So this is in 2018. This is the subject property, and you can see just here the reference on the width of the driveway here. There's the exterior wall of the garage, and you can see here, and it extends past, and you can see outside of this landscape wall, it kind of runs down here. Let me move to the next page. There we go. There's a different view of the same driveway. You can see the width there. And then moving here to October of 2023, you can see that this is the same concrete. Obviously, the apron's been replaced, but it's the same concrete throughout. And then you can see in April of 2024 that beyond the existing concrete, this area was added in pavers. And this, obviously, the landscape wall was replaced also, but you can see the changed width. And there's the width there. So in March of 2024, the petitioner, Mr. Begbie, installed a 3-foot, 2-inch wide paver pathway next to the driveway, which was 9 feet 6 inches, and without a permit. This effectively widened the driveway to 12 feet 8 inches. Okay. So this is a diagram from the zoning ordinance that shows the allowable dimensions for driveways. Effectively, you can have a 10-foot wide driveway until you start approaching the garage. This bump out indicates the garage. And this area here, the driveway can widen to be as wide as the garage for 20 feet in front of the garage. And then at that point, it has to start tapering down and then down to the 10-foot allowed max. Another note here is that parallel walkways must be separated from the driveway by 3 feet. So it's not shown on this diagram, but if you had a walkway on this diagram, it would have to be located approximately here, or maybe a little bit closer. So there's a 3-foot separation that's required between walkways and driveways. Now on the survey of the property, and this is just a note that was included in the background of the staff memo, the survey inaccurately showed, unfortunately, the measurements of the driveway. It showed it was 11 feet 2 inches wide. However, the actual on-the-ground measurement of the concrete is that before the pavers were added, it was 9 feet 6 inches wide. And this is kind of showing you what the area is here. So that original, and remember, the underlying survey is incorrect. So the darker shaded gray area here shows the extent of the original driveway, and I'll zoom in a little bit here so maybe we can see better. So that darker gray area shows the original extent of the driveway. The red area shows how you could widen the driveway under the standards within the zoning ordinance and still be compliant. And then this brown area shows the 3-foot 2-inch width of the pavers that were added next to the driveway. So staff notified Mr. Begbie that the walkway could not be approved as it was built by staff under the zoning code. At that point, Mr. Begbie submitted a request for an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act to keep the walkway as an accommodation for a family member who has a disability that requires enough space to exit a vehicle and walk on a level and stable surface to their home. Village Attorney Pickrell advised Mr. Begbie that he must apply for a variation as well as the request for an accommodation under ADA. So this process is required as part of this request. The village board will consider both requests for the variation and for the accommodation under ADA on July 18th. As with a previous request on Maplewood Road that was for the fence, the village board can deny the request for the variation and approve the request for an accommodation. That could be an outcome, potentially. And before, and a couple of notes here included in the staff report. I included some information about non-conforming driveways in the village and ADA standards. There is a recommendation from Village Attorney Pickerel that was provided in the materials sent to the Planning Commission to guide their voting, but Mr. Pickerel also has some information about the ADA voting.
So this commission's familiar with how to grant a variation. The standards are well established. With a variation, one generally speaking looks only at the physical features on the property and the obstacles to development and the impact on the neighborhood. It's those three essential facts are memorialized in 5 factors, but those are basically it. An ADA accommodation is under federal law and in a way supersedes to an extent our variation standards. So an ADA asks not to look at the property itself, but to look at the conditions of the people who are using the property. So there's an inherent tension here for what this board must consider and what is and the standards before you. The case law on this isn't perfectly clear, but basically the way that things should go is that tonight, all you're being asked to consider the same question you always ask. Does this meet the standards that we've established under the village code for a variation? If the answer is yes, then you can recommend that the variation be approved. If the answer is no, and remember that those standards only focus on the physical aspects of the property, I would suggest then that you say that no, it does not meet the standards. But for the village board, we ask that the village board consider both these standards and the disability when making a final determination on this issue. I provided some draft language if you have any questions about that, but we feel as though that is the best way to approach this issue. If anyone has any questions for me about how we're proceeding, just let me know.
Thank you.
And the petitioner is here tonight, Mr. Begbie. You wanted to present here.
Yeah, thanks for hearing this.
Mr. Begbie, could you please raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you swear the testimony you will give is true to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for hearing this. And summarized it quite well, really. Had a miscommunication with our contractor. Thought he got a permit. He did not. Asked if I wanted a walkway. I said yes. Walkway is there without a permit. Member of my family has a disability that was aggravated pretty badly recently due to slipping on a wet surface coming out of the car, which was the impetus to put the walkway next to the driveway. If there's an injury, an injury like that, we're just going to try to figure out what we can do. The only thing I would say as a suggestion, and I respect the process of all of this, is to request a variance. It costs $1,000, and for a disabled person to have to request a variance and pay $1,000 just seems kind of wrong ethically to me. I don't know if that's anything that this committee can change or have input upon, but it's just something that my family thought was worth mentioning. Other than that, I appreciate your consideration. I also understand that a variance would be a better outcome for me and my family because that follows the home, not the owner of the home, or an ADA request follows the owner of the home, which we would have to remove it once we move, if we were to ever move. So in that light, I would appreciate an accepted variance request. If not, then I'm sure we'll talk again over the ADA request. But happy to answer any questions that you may have about any of this.
Thank you, Mr. Begbie. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the petitioner? No? All right, at this time, is there anyone else who would like to speak on behalf of the petition? All right. Does not appear to be anyone.
Anybody else just generally wants to talk about it too?
Oh, sure, or
Yeah.
wants to speak about it. Thank you.
Yeah, not necessarily on behalf of the petition, but just in general on this issue.
All right, seeing no one, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we will open the floor for discussion by the commission.
have an initial question. I was a little confused about whether this is a pathway or in a wider driveway. It seemed like the petitioner was only asking for a pathway immediately adjacent to the driveway, but the way it's written, it's allowing a 12-foot, 8-inch driveway. And obviously, I assume there's going to be technical changes between pavers or any kind of substance that can be used as a driveway surface versus a pathway surface. And that probably what has been installed are for a pathway. So can you explain that?
Sure. I think if you might consider it as a layperson, not looking at the zoning code as a pathway. Per the zoning code, a pathway becomes a pathway when it's separated from the driveway by 3 feet. Otherwise, it's just a wide driveway.
Okay. Are there any like technical requirements so that this, if this, what has already been placed is approved, that it would have to be relaid in order to meet any standards for having a driveway surface?
It's located on private property. A building permit would be required, and any requirements that are under the building permit would be verified after that, at that point.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or discussion from the commission? All right, in that case, I will take us through the standards for variations. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall not recommend variations from the zoning ordinance unless it makes findings based upon the evidence presented to it in specific cases. A, that because of a particular physical or other unusual condition of the specific property involved, a particular hardship or practical difficulty to the owner would result, as distinguished from from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. Such conditions may include, but are not limited to, the presence of an existing use or structure, whether conforming or non-conforming, irregular or substandard shape or size, exceptional topographical features, or other extraordinary physical condition peculiar to and inherent in the subject property that amounts to more than a mere inconvenience to the owner, and that relate to or arises out of the lot and/or the structures thereon, rather than the personal situation of the current owner of the lots. I'll say I don't feel that there are any unusual circumstances related to the lot itself, as it's fairly typical of a single-family lot within the village.
I know where I want to land on this, but I also know that I need to say that I'm sympathetic to the petitioners. Human issues, I can't think of a better word right now, but the driveway itself is typical of the area as, it's not, kind of as you said, it's not unusual, and this commission developed the driveway standards for a reason a while ago to limit the amount of pavement in the front of a house. Yeah, I don't think we're not at particular hardship.
I think this application is clearly related to the individuals who are living at the house and not the property itself or anything particular to the property or the structures thereon. So I don't think the first standard for variation is met in this case.
Standard number 2, situations in which the ordinance prevents the owner from reestablishing, restoring, or maintaining a material feature or significant architectural feature related to the lot or structure, or from maintaining the architectural integrity of the lot or structure.
That doesn't apply.
Agreed.
That the purpose of the variation is not based primarily upon a desire to increase financial gain.
That's true, I think.
Is met. The alleged difficulty or hardship that has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property.
That's true. That's true.
The conditions upon which the petition for variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification.
I think that standard is not met. I think it is applicable to many other properties in the same zoning classification.
The granting of the variation will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located.
I think that doesn't apply.
Right, so the granting of the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
That's true.
No, because we're trying to maintain those narrower driveway widths.
I don't think it would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. That would be how I would read that. If it was extending over the entire width of the property or half of it or something, I would understand that, but a 2.5 foot, 25% wider driveway from 10 feet, which is narrow, but it's narrow because of the width of the garage. I don't see it as changing the essential character.
Somewhat agree, but somewhat disagree in the sense of kind of where I started is we have come to the conclusion as a community that trying to maintain a limited width of driveway is a goal, and we specifically carved out that driveways that were in existence prior to the establishment of the code would be grandfathered in, but we're not going to allow additional driveways in town to be widened.
I agree with both of you. We did review the driveway standards in a lot of detail, and there are some goals that we're trying to meet through those standards. Does this particular situation, again, change the essential character of the neighborhood? I wouldn't go that far. I would say that, it still meets the essential character of the neighborhood.
I'd agree with that. I mean, this seems to me like it's worded too strongly, the criteria. I mean, I don't really see, 2.5 foot addition changing the essential character of an entire neighborhood. And, to define neighborhood, what does neighborhood mean? Does neighborhood mean a block? Does neighborhood mean the, area within, the houses nearest to the closest parks? I mean, there's a dozen things I could think of that would define neighborhood, and I just don't think it does it here. I don't think it alters the character at all.
I really don't want to go down this slope, to be honest, because we're going to then debate is what's an offset from side yard? What's that called?
Side yard offset? No?
No.
Side.
I'm just thinking of all of our setback requirements. All of our setback requirements that are rather specific and do get down to the nearest foot. And so I don't know where to fit our existing, how do we emphasize the need to comply with our existing codes? And I mean, that's obviously why we're here, and I'm using essential character of the neighborhood as a proxy for that.
But isn't the whole purpose behind asking for a variance to go beyond those?
Yes,
So I think
but
I would agree with Commissioner Matthews that this is a strongly worded, essential character of the neighborhood. And I don't think a 2-foot paver next to the driveway would essentially affect the character of the neighborhood. But
And that's fair.
yeah.
I think it's important to remember that these standards are meant to apply to the entire breadth of possibility of variations that someone could ask for, whether it's a 2-foot driveway extension, or if I'd like to demolish my home and ask for a use variation to put a gun range there. There are a lot of things that people could ask for, and so we have to, take into consideration that these should be broadly applicable. With that said, I don't think that we need to come to a consensus on this particular standard, as long as we can come up with a motion when that time comes.
It's fair.
And then moving on to our last standard, the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, or substantially increase the congestion of the public streets, or increase the danger of fire, or impair natural drainage, or create drainage problems on adjacent properties, or endanger the public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood.
That's met.
That's true, right.
All right. Unless anyone has any further discussion, would like to entertain a motion?
I would,
Actually, quick question.
Yeah.
So do all 7 of these standards have to be met in order to approve the variance? You can't, okay.
Yes.
can we read that last number 2? A variation shall be recommended only if evidence presented in the judgment of the Planning and Zoning Commission sustains all of the standards enumerated above. And so I would move, based on that statement, that we recommend that the variation not be approved.
Can I amend that ever so slightly?
Certainly.
I'd like to recommend that we do not approve it with the caveat that we ask the village board to consider whether or not this disability, the ADA accommodation, warrants granting the variation.
Yes, probably that has to be, it's not granting the variation, I'm guessing, the lawyer can straighten us out, but it's,
Sorry, variation in accommodation.
yeah, provided that the board should consider granting an ADA accommodation outside of our variation procedures. And I agree with that.
Commissioner Pelletier, are you all right with that?
Yes, I do agree with that. I thought we were going to discuss that separately, but I'm happy to.
Yes, I thought so.
All right.
Appropriate, all in one motion, then I think.
Okay.
Could I request that the motion be restated? Just for clarity, I apologize.
I'll summarize, since I've already butchered this badly enough. As is typical, that we reject the request for the variation, but add the caveat that the village board consider whether that they find accommodation through, or find ADA accommodation through other means specific to the owner.
And just to clarify, you're making that motion because we feel as though one or more of the standards have not been met, but notwithstanding, you're finding that implicit in the motion that it was not met, you're recommending the village board should consider whether the disability described in the application warrants the granting of a variation in light of the ADA. Is that a fair?
Granting accommodation.
Yep.
Variation, no, because variation travels with the property.
All right. With that being our motion, is there a second?
I actually have one more question, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I concur that the petitioner should not have to pay $1,000 to request this variation in this instance, so I don't know if it's appropriate to add that recommendation to this motion or to make a separate recommendation to the board.
I can convey that recommendation to the board. The board is ultimately has the ability to waive fines
Okay,
and fees.
so,
It's just
right,
this-
we'd
this
ask that
is
they
not
waive in
one.
this case, okay.
Correct. And if we think that's generally not appropriate, that's would require a changing of the village code. But that's beyond the scope of this motion.
Okay.
All right. Is there a second?
Second. Oh, I suppose. I apologize. Like I said, I do poorly sometimes.
It's Commissioner Pelletier's motion?
Yes.
Okay. And are you seconding?
And therefore you can second.
I second.
You can
that.
Second? All right. Is there any additional discussion? All right. Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pelletier,
Aye.
Commissioner Marhol,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson. Aye. Commissioner Matthews.
Aye.
Commissioner Braun,
Aye.
Chairperson Hadigan.
Aye. The motion passes. This will go to the village board on July 18th. Thank you. Our next public hearing is a special use for a private school. To consider an application for a special use to permit to allow a private school to operate at 53 Northgate Road in the R1A zoning district. Petitioners are Richard and Milagros Andrews for Interiami Montessori House Incorporated. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on June 5th, 2024, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept the exhibits?
I
So
motion, okay, I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, would the petitioner like to present? Or I'm sorry, Ann, you can go ahead.
I just had a brief presentation before we hand it over to the petitioner. So the petitioners have operated a daycare and school at 53 Northgate Road since early 2009. In 2014, the petitioners received a special use permit to operate a private school with no more than 8 children on the property at one time. That was one of the conditions of their approval. This request is to change the special use approval to increase the number of children who can be on the property at any one time from 8 children to 12. And just a little bit of background, in March of this year, village staff became aware that the DCFS license for the school allows up to 15 children on the property at one time. And social media posts by the Montessori show that up to 14 children at a time on the property at various times throughout the year. The village's inquiry into the school's operations was prompted by an inquiry from an outside agency regarding the status of lead pipes within the school. And once the village determined that the school was operating beyond the capacity approved by the village board in 2014, staff contacted the petitioners to address the issue. And just to clarify, there was not a complaint made about the operations of the school. It was an inquiry about the school's lead pipes that led to staff looking into the capacity of the school. Staff advised the petitioners that they would need to either limit the number of children on the property to 8 per the approval, or to amend the special use approval to allow more than 8 children on the property at one time. So the current DCFS license, again, states their capacity is 15 children. And this is divided into 12 daytime and 3 extended. This indicates that staff can care for 12 children and up to 3 additional children who attend school full-time either before or after school and go to the Montessori after. So you'd have 12 children being cared for during the day. If you had maybe siblings or other children who are attending school and went there for after-school care, they could have up to 3 children. So that would lead to 15 children per the DCFS license on the property at one time. The petitioner stated that if their request is approved, they would agree to the condition of approval that would limit their capacity to 12 children, regardless of what the DCFS license allows for. The petitioner included several letters of support in the application materials. As of today, staff received 2 additional letters regarding the application, and those were included in the public feedback attachment that was included in the staff memo. We haven't received any phone calls or visits about the application. Just to note, the properties immediately surrounding the property are 57 Northgate, and the owner of that property submitted a letter in support of the application, which was included in the public feedback section. 49 Northgate, the petitioner submitted a letter of support in support of the application from those property owners, which are included in the application materials. And behind the property is 436 Loudon Road, and the village has not received feedback from the property owner of that property. Public Safety Director Buckley stated the police department has not received any complaints about the school, and village staff haven't received any complaints. But that's all I had in terms of a summary for staff, and I know the petitioners are here and interested in presenting.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to,
Please.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here. My name's Kevin Bry. I'm counsel for the petitioners, speaking on their behalf. I want to thank the village, and especially Ann, who assisted us in getting the application materials, and we appreciate that. The petitioner here is Interiami Montessori House, Inc. That's the company. Milagros and Richard Andrews are the principals here. This special use request is for a private school with up to 12 students, no more. We appreciate the distinction drawn on the 3 extended students that would bring that to 15 We're not asking for 3 extended students. I think that's covering situations where siblings or children of the care providers will be at the home too. And we don't have that here. We're not asking for anything more than 12. One of the questions that I thought Ann put into the materials was, you know, would the petitioners be willing to have the license amended to just state the number that the village ultimately would approve? Yes, of course, they would be willing to do that if that's made a condition. So we do believe that the application materials that we've submitted, I know you've had a chance to look at, and the recent usage of 12 students do support that this is a proper use that would be beneficial to the village under the standards. I would like to mention that in Ann's background, she indicated that 14 students may have been shown in social media. My understanding is that that would have been 2 siblings or additional people there, but not enrolled students. The enrollment has been 12, and that's all we're seeking, and that's all they would continue to do. But they were there, according to the social media posts. Basically, we think that the needs of the families in this area, this is the only DCFS licensed home daycare facility in Riverside, and there's clearly a need because there's a growing need in the community between not only English language speaking families, but Latino families, given that it is an all Spanish environment, which may suit the needs of any family. So we do believe that this is a proper special use, and we are available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions of the petitioner at this time?
To clarify, the original special use was for 8 students, and that was granted in 2014. And then at some point since then, we've now got 12, yes? And then all the DCFS rules, all of those approvals and certifications are all, that's all worked out well.
It has worked out well. We personally, the company has not received any complaints nor anything passed on from the village or the police or anything. And I think the support letters reflect that it is working out very well for the students.
I'm sorry, sir. We did forget to swear you in at the beginning. Do you swear that the testimony that you've given and will give is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. At this time, if there is anyone else who would like to speak on the petition, now would be the time.
My name is Edward Zan, the person I would just like
All right, sir. We'll swear you in. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, I know, I believe my letter of support was submitted for exhibit, but, just to confirm that, but just to be clear, I am not a current resident of the village, but I live next to Miss Andrews' school for 5 years, from March 2018 to April of 2024, or 2023. And all I can say is, as I said in my letter, but when we moved next door, I didn't know actually a school was there, and I really didn't have any understanding what a Montessori school was. But I will tell you, I learned real quick, and some of the things that I noticed firsthand, I spent a lot of time outside in my backyard because of the projects I was doing in the house. And I saw those kids out there every single day, and I thought that was the most amazing thing that I've seen since I was a child. I mean, to see the number of kids that are out there, I never counted them, but, there was more than one, just for students, whatever was authorized. To hear them play, to watch them play, to see them interact, it was so refreshing, I'm telling you, I thought it was outstanding. We need more of that. And the way they interact with their kids, they screw around, but they were so polite, so respectful. Miss Andrews' teachers, awesome. The way they spoke to these kids was so respectful and just so meaningful and so handled. And you could see the kids just respected everything that they've done. It really was something to see. Miss Andrews herself, when she came out, if you go in her house, you'd see that's her passion. Things are set up for this school strictly for the benefit of these children. And, when she spoke to these kids, they just were in awe with her. It was really something. As far as any issues regarding traffic or noise, never. We never had any problems with noise. Traffic, nothing different than the ordinary neighborhood. Northgate carries a lot of traffic anyway. You have a lot of cut-throughs trying to avoid the intersection at 26 and Des Plaines. You have a lot of people coming through, heading down to Long Common and go to Harlem to bypass a shopping center. They drive too fast down there as it is. It'd be better if there were some, signs there advising some people, hey, there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood. Not so much applicable to the school, because every day you have kids riding their bikes and doing stuff. When the parents dropped off their children, picked them up, they actually made conditions better because they slowed down that traffic. Parking was just like if we had people over at our house. You have limited parking, it's only on one side of the street. Parking is the same. If you had company or doings at your house, it'd be the same impacts. I thought it was a great school. I think she does a wonderful service. If anything, I think it'd be a disservice if that school didn't have the children it did. In personal opinion, it'd be wonderful to see if she could be convinced to set up a Montessori school for adults. And I think that would be wonderful. And again, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, if there's no other public participation, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now I'll open the floor for discussion amongst the commissioners.
Before we get into too much, Attorney Pickrell, you recommended adding 2 additional conditions to an approval?
Yes.
Numbers 5 and 6 on page 7. Or sorry, it's not. I have it divided out differently, but.
I'd be happy to explain those. Yeah, one of these, we'll start with number 5, easier one. We are issued as a special use permit which authorizes a use. Sometimes people get a little confused and think I've received a permit, therefore I can start building things because they both use the word permit. So I often include in the approval a little reminder saying this doesn't authorize any construction of anything. This is just authorizes what it purports to authorize, which is, in this case, it would be additional students attending. I view that condition as more of a instructive, and we found it to be helpful in the past. The more significant condition, which is one that's going to be new to this body, our firm and with our other clients, we find it beneficial to include a document called an unconditional consent form, and unconditional agreement and consent. And that unconditional agreement really does several things. First, what it does is that the person receiving the special use permit or any other zoning relief agrees that all our procedures were followed. It is protection for us. They've participated. It eliminates the need to have any inquiry about whether or not they had an adequate opportunity to speak, which they obviously had this evening with representation of counsel. The other part of it is an indemnity agreement. Now, when we issue a special use permit, that is not our risk. That is, someone could theoretically challenge it in court. And what people will often find is that they will expect that the village will, if their ordinances are challenged, that the village will defend the ordinances. But the village has no obligation to do so. The village can just say, well, that's relief we're giving to you. We're just going to let it lapse, and by default, you lose the lawsuit, and the use isn't then invalidated. In this case, let's just say we issued a special use permit here, approving 12. There was a lawsuit, we didn't do anything about it, and the ordinance approving it was invalid. You then revert to the prior special use permit, and then 4 students would have to be disenrolled. So what we do is say, for your benefit and for ours, if there's a lawsuit, you will indemnify us, which really requires that they come to us with a conversation to say, do you want to, we're the entity that gets sued to challenge a special use permit. Do you want us to defend it? It's a costly endeavor. Is that worth it to you? Now, some people might just say, no, it's not worth it. We'll just, disenroll the students. Others might say, yes, we will, but the condition of that is that they will pay the financial burden.
Then that forces the person who requested the variance to defend said variance.
Right.
Essentially.
They since we're the ones that issued it, we're always going to be the named defendant. They could theoretically spend money and intervene. It's probably more costly. It's probably cheaper for us just to defend it ourselves. But it's in everyone's. It's an incentive for us to defend their use, and it protects them as well. So it's really kind of in everyone's.
No, this makes sense, thank you. And then the other makes sense as well, that just,
Just one clarification on the last part. So there is, at that point in time, let's say someone did challenge a zoning decision of some kind. Is there then interaction between the petitioner, the recipient, and the village? Or does the village just go off and decide what it wants and then?
There would,
They're not
I can't ever say always, but generally speaking, we will, if the petitioner is not interested in us defending, then we won't. And if we are interested, then we will.
Okay.
And
So if the village is interested in defending on its own, it will. If it's not particularly, it would then consult with the property owner.
correct.
Okay, all right.
Any other discussion on this item?
I would like to offer that, I don't recall when this came to us for a special use prior, where it was 2014. My recollection is that, I think they wanted 12 students at that time, and we denied it, basically partially to kind of see how things would go as granted. And it seems in the absence of any complaints and with letters of support, it seems that there have not been issues with the way that it's been run thus far.
Yeah, this is a somewhat unique circumstance in that we've seen the use in operation as proposed before we're voting on it.
and to Teresa's point, Commissioner Peltier, I looked at the 2014 discussion, some of that voting, and it was clearly a touch contentious to get to that point where the 8 were, that original variance was granted. Now, I say this in front, there's other things that I'll say momentarily, but I don't like the fact that we have a use that was done ahead of time. We should always be trying to follow the process and not trying to circumvent our rules and going against things. On the other hand, everything that Commissioner Peltier said is true, and the neighbors seem to be very much in support of this variance. And then there's also a larger issue in that childcare is rather difficult to find these days, so anytime we support that within reason is a good thing.
I would echo the childcare crisis in this country is very challenging. As a family with 2 working parents and 2 small children, like, it is one of the most stressful parts of my day, worrying about what you're going to do with your kids when they're little. And I think we should be doing as much as we can within the letter of all of these policies and to make it work for these families.
I don't have anything to say about the substance, but since Commissioner Marvel raised the 2 conditions, there were a couple other conditions that were proposed that I would like to just comment on. So in the original ordinance approving the first special use, number 3 was references signage on the subject property shall conform to all village code and zoning code regulations. It seems to me like surplusage or redundant or not necessary because of course they have to comply with village code. So I would be in support of just eliminating that. And then there's a reference to, as their attorney recommended, about changing the DCFS permit or license. I don't see a need to ask them to do that at this point in time because
We just covered, I don't think we're recommending a change in license. Am I correct? Ann?
because right now they're allowed to have 15 children. So I think the suggestion was that they should ask for a change in that to only allow them to have 12.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see that as necessary, so I don't think that needs to be.
I agree, and that's not something that I'm recommending.
Okay.
Yeah, so-
Okay. And then the last one was just that would be, it seems to me appropriate to have that period of abeyance during the summer increased to 100 days from 60, which is in the current ordinance.
This is the
That's the bottom
section.
of page 7, the last, well, the second to last full paragraph on page 7.
It's part of it's the last paragraph of the conditions discussion.
Yes. Currently, the ordinance says that the approval will lapse, the special use will lapse if the use is not active for a period of 60 days. And the recommendation by staff, I think, was that should be increased to 100 days to account for the entire summer period. So that would
Makes sense.
Yes.
All right, is there any additional discussion? All right, in that case, let's go through these standards for special uses. 1, that the proposed use is designated by the zoning ordinance as a special use in the district in which the use is to be located.
Yes, true.
2, the proposed use will comply with all applicable regulations in the district in which the use is to be located.
True.
Yes.
Yes.
Number 3, the location and size of the proposed use, the nature and intensity of the operation involved in or conducted in connection with it, the size of the site in relation to it, and the location of the site with respect to streets giving access to it are such that it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it is located.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. Number 4, the location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, and fences, and the nature and extent of the landscaping on the site are such that the use will not unreasonably hinder or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings.
Yes,
Yes.
that's met.
Number 5, parking areas will be of adequate size for the particular use, properly located and suitably screened from adjoining uses, and the entrance and exit drives will be laid out so as to prevent traffic hazards and nuisances.
It doesn't really apply, but it's met.
Apply.
Okay, Number 6, the proposed use will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood.
That is met. That's true. Yes.
And number 7, at least 1 year has elapsed since any denial by the village board of any prior application for a special use permit that would have authorized substantially the same use of all or part of the site, and conditions in the area have substantially changed.
That's
It does
correct.
not apply.
All right, do we have a motion?
A motion to approve the special use with the conditions that are enumerated with one change. So the conditions are there shall not be more than 12 children on the subject property. Special use permit is not transferable, meaning it doesn't run with the land. Number 3, we will change to special use only terminates if it has ceased to be used for 100 days. Number 4, the petitioner shall maintain and operate the facility in conformance with the DCFS and village code. And then the standard agreement for relief, basically it's not a building permit. And then the condition number 6, which is the indemnity agreement.
So to clarify, Commissioner Rahul, you do not want to have the condition about signage on the subject property?
Correct. I am changing the signage condition to the 100-day condition.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pelletier,
Aye.
Commissioner Marhol,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson,
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews.
Aye.
Commissioner Braun,
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. You don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting unless you would like to. So the next three items on the agenda, PZ 24-005, 007, and 008, relating to the proposed Starbuds development. We're going to take all three of those together for the purpose of basically making it easier to follow the meeting, and then we will vote individually on the request for the variations, the special use, and the site plan approval. And so I'll read all the public hearing requests now. PZ 24-005, a public hearing to consider an application for variations, including variations from the following sections of the Riverside zoning ordinance. 1, Section 1096, to allow fewer interior landscape medians than required. 1062C, to allow a portion of the landscape median next to the drive-through lane to be less than 10 feet wide. 1084A1, to allow the drive-through lane to be 12 feet wide in areas. 105D1, to allow the building to have public entrances at locations other than the primary street frontage. 1056E2, to allow Lexon paneling as a building material. 1056B2, to allow the ground floor windows of a commercial building to have a transparency of less than 50%. And 107B2, to allow light to shine on the public right-of-way and to allow light intensity to exceed 1-foot candle at the property line. Also, PZ 24-007, a public hearing to consider an application for a special use permit to allow a retail sales establishment with a drive-through facility in the B1 TOD district per section 1059. And PZ 24-0008, a site plan review at 3320 South Harlem Avenue and 363 to 369 East Burlington Street for the proposed Starbuds development. The petition for all three of these items is Starbuds. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Notice of the public hearings was published in the Landmark on June 5th, 2024, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes. All right, Ann?
Thank you. For the benefit of the commissioners, the materials at your desk were emailed to you this afternoon. Those were revised civil plans and the revised narrative from the applicant. And I'll let the applicant speak to the changes that were made to the materials, but the civil plans, at the very least, I do have visuals of for the board. I know they're very hard to read at that scale. So the purpose of the meeting, of this meeting, is to review the applications related to the proposed development of the properties at the corner of Harlem and Burlington. The proposed development is for a new commercial building with 2 tenant spaces and related improvements such as a parking lot and a drive-through. This does not include a discussion on whether Starbuds can operate a cannabis dispensary on this site. A cannabis dispensary can operate on the site without special approvals, and I'll provide more information on that in a minute. The 2 properties, which total 23,246 square feet, or a little more than a half an acre, are currently owned by the village. Both properties are located in the B1 TOD district, which the village created in February of 2023 to encourage the redevelopment of sites with a mix of uses with an emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle-friendly environment. Starbuds is currently under contract to buy these 2 properties, and they propose to clear the sites and redevelop them with a new dispensary and a second commercial space. So, the tenant of the second space hasn't been determined yet, but it could be occupied by a number of commercial uses that are permitted in the district. So taking a look at the site here, we can see these 2 sites are B1 TOD, and you can see the location here on Harlem, Burlington, and with the train behind. Moving to an aerial photo, you can get a better sense of the site. This property is not part of the subject properties. It's a separate property, and access to that property is through here. And that'll be maintained after these sites are redeveloped if they are. But you can see the current circulation on the property, these two curb cuts. The curb cut on this property is shared here with this alley, providing access to the area back here. Some photos of the property. This is looking across the street, standing in Berwyn, looking across the street at the property. You can see the Sherwin-Williams building that was developed nearby recently. And standing with the Sherwin-Williams building to your back, looking at the property. This is the parking lot, and then there's the edge of the building on the Burlington lot. And then there's that alley that I mentioned. You can see the on-street parking here. I'll touch on that in a minute. There's a better view of the alley. The back of the building, here's the alley between the two properties, accessing this parking area.
Could I ask a question at this point?
Of course.
So is that a private alley or a public alley?
It's a private alley. It's private parking.
And who owns it?
I cannot tell you off the top of my head who owns it.
Okay.
It is not one, it's not the petitioner.
It's not part of this
It is
parcel?
not part of this application. Sure. So they've got parking, and you can see the train here. Kind of a view of the entire alley. I'll touch on that tree in a minute. And you can see there's just a line of wheel stops effectively that separate the two properties. And this lane, I believe, accessed previously an ATM that served the bank across the street before Sherwin-Williams was developed. This is a view across the train tracks, across the street, again looking at that back building. And then you can see a straight shot to Sherwin-Williams. For context, these are the closest buildings to the subject property. This is on the north side of East Burlington Street, next to the Sherwin-Williams. So you have Sherwin-Williams and then the properties that I just showed you further to the west. On the same side, on the south side of East Burlington, headed towards Harlem, Harlem would be down here. You have this building here, and then this neighboring building here. We'll get into the site plan in just a second, but I'll bring it up here. The building on the Burlington site that exists currently is not habitable, and it's been vacant since 2014. There are structural problems with the roof and the front wall of the building that would make redevelopment difficult. There's more information about that building in the staff report. I'm happy to cover that if you're interested. But the village forester Mike Collins visited the site and determined that the trees that are on site include trees that are either in poor condition and should be replaced. Specifically, there's a tree here near Harlem that has a split in the tree. It looks healthy from a distance, but in the middle you can see a split down the trunk. That's a sugar maple. Or they are non-native or invasive species. So that big tree that we saw behind the building is apparently a tree of heaven that is invasive and should be removed. So he recommended not keeping any of the trees on the site due to their health or the fact that they're non-native. Returning to the issue of cannabis dispensaries, they are permitted by right in the B1 TOD district. That means that a special use permit for that use is not required. Dispensaries can operate within the zoning district as long as they meet the use standards listed in the zoning ordinance that are specific to cannabis dispensaries. The use standards include operational issues, such as having the required permits and approvals from the state, and coordinating with the Riverside Police Department by providing access to security footage when requested, and other operational issues with the police department. Another use standard is that consumption of any products sold by the dispensary is prohibited on site. So even if the neighboring tenant space was a restaurant, for example, a sandwich shop, customers who purchase items in the dispensary and maybe sit outside in the outdoor seating area that's shown on the site plan cannot consume any of the products that they purchased in the dispensary. So I'll zoom in and note here that you've got the dispensary footprint, here's Burlington and Harlem, the retail space here, and then an outdoor area that could be used for outdoor seating if you did have a restaurant. Wouldn't necessarily need to be outdoor seating though. Let's see. The dispensary would be allowed to operate from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is what's currently allowed per the municipal code. The use standards also include one separation requirement. They cannot be located within 500 feet of the property line of a pre-existing public or private school. There is no pre-existing public or private school near these properties, so that requirement is met. And as a note, currently drive-through lanes, which is shown for this property, are not permitted for cannabis dispensaries by state law. However, there's a bill that the petitioners feel confident enough that will be approved to allow drive-through uses, that they are proposing this development with a drive-through for the dispensary. That's outside of whether it's allowed is outside the purview of the village. That's a state issue. So if the state allows it, the village can allow that type of use, not for a drive-through itself, which we'll discuss later. So the one note a couple of notes actually about our variations that we're requesting. So the zoning code doesn't specify a minimum or maximum lane width specifically for drive-through aisles, but it does specify that one-way drive aisles within a parking lot must be a minimum of 18 feet wide. So probably the 18-foot width requirement wasn't intended to be applicable to drive-through lanes, but absent a specificity that they were exempt from it, staff recommended that the applicant include the request for a drive-through lane less than 18 feet in the variation requests. The proposed drive-through is 12 feet wide at the narrowest point, and it widens to 14 feet wide here during the bend. So it's approximately 12 feet through this area and kind of widens out as you can kind of make the turn in that area. And here's the pickup window for the dispensary. As noted in the staff memo, the signs will require a separate variation due to their size. They would exceed the sign limit. That process goes through the PZC with final approval by the village board. And staff noted that though a rendering of the signs that was included with this application shows a cannabis leaf over the green star on the sign, the petitioners were reminded that the leaf would need to be removed from the final sign design. Just a note, the landscape plan does include non-native species. Now, you can plant a non-native species as long as it's not on the list of prohibited plants. However, there is a list of recommended native plants, and staff is recommending that the landscape architect discuss with the village forester his ideas about substituting some of those plants out to use more native plants in the landscape plan. And prior to the meeting, the petitioner's representative stated that the material on the exterior of the building will be glass panels, not Lexan, which is a plastic material. So based on the information that was provided, staff determined that the glass panels, as suggested, would meet the definition of a glass curtain wall system, since they are a non-structural system. So glass curtain wall systems are a prohibited building material and requires a variation. The village attorney confirmed that the public notice provided for this application adequately covers this request, since the public notice covers the section of the code that includes the prohibition on these two building materials. They're listed within the same section. So I know that's a tremendous amount of information, and there's a tremendous amount of information in the staff report, and I know that the applicants would like to make a presentation, and I'm happy to help them with their visuals if you'd like to do that at this time.
Could I make
Unless you have any questions for me.
Could I make a request too? Seeing, like, if there could be some specifying of where those glass curtain walls, like this is going to be a glass curtain wall, this is going to be a glass curtain wall, some of the specifics of the building itself, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Good? Good.
All right.
Oh, yeah?
Yes,
I was
thank you.
gonna remind you this time.
All right, do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge?
I do, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I guess you had no choice to be here, but we, but thank you for your time, and thank you, too, for putting this together for us. My name's Brian Gould. I'm the architect for Starbuds. I've done all their facilities pretty much here in Illinois, including the one that they did in Riverside. The secondary location, well, first locations will be their secondary location. Little different. This one will be a ground up, as you know. Taking over an existing property, as you saw, that is in a condition that, from my observation as well, was something that we really, couldn't maintain from a financial standpoint, just given the deterioration of the building, along with the site, the orientation of the site, which you may have seen in the narrative that I wrote. Everything that was kind of set up for that site is not really what we want and not what Riverside is really looking for new development. So with that said, me and the team from Starbuds came up with multiple renditions of this plan to try to figure out what makes the most sense on this site. There's a lot of characteristics on this site, as you guys know, in regards to, if you could pull up the site plan. And so we have a location here where we have Harlem to the east, but very close to the tracks that's on the southeast end there. You guys also saw pictures on the south end of this property. There's parking, which you could kind of see a little bit of that we show in the civil plan. That is not part of our property. That is BNSF property that is being leased out to what we believe the property to the west for additional parking for their facility. So that kind of answered your question. You're asking about that drive. That's a private drive. That was the first thing we kind of thought about too when we developed this site is, can we use the drive? Can we use that for access, right? We're doing another location in Westmont, kind of the same situation where we're on this corner and how do we safely get people in and out without exiting onto Harlem and gaining access to this site. But we found out that that is a private drive that's not part of our property, and we can't use that for any type of entrance there. So with that said, there's some similarities, believe it or not, that you'll see, even though we have taken this site and really mirrored it, if you can see that. We've taken the building, brought it to the east, closer to Harlem, and put our parking to the west. Versus what it is now, which is the building set back at the alleyway, and then you have all the parking along with an ATM entrance to the east, which is very close to where we have our exit for the drive-through currently now. So when we did this and when we looked at this, we said to ourselves, okay, what can we do to create a site that not only has a street presence for the building, signage, possibilities for the building, closer to Harlem. As you see, Sherwin-Williams did the same thing. They brought that building closer. They could have brought it back, but they wanted to bring that building closer to the street and have that parking close toward the back end to the west. So safety is one of the top priorities for Starbuds. As you can imagine, everyone that goes there, we want to make sure that patrons are able to go there, park, enter the building, exit the building, back to cars, and exit. Having that building where the current building sits, having the building where it is now, but an entrance on the east end would create a lot of issues, right? You'd have to go into the building, it'd be very awkward. Go into the building on the east end, almost as a pedestrian, and then you'd have to go around the building to the back of the building to go to the parking lot. And again, where we're located, we're kind of cut off, right? We have the tracks to the south there. That's a hard line right there. Harlem Avenue, very busy, especially right at that intersection. So the focus of this site is more of, creating the building as a standing point for saying, hey, here we are, here's the building, and then bringing you in off of Burlington to where the parking's there. Plenty of parking, plenty of circulation, as you can see. There's no issues with circulation there. And then, as Ann stated, we will have an area out in front there. I'm not gonna lie, I can't take credit for that. There's another gentleman that came up with a good idea for that. And that is to kind of create, we didn't need any additional parking there. And the way we had it before it was kind of an odd setup to get that flow into the drive-through. So we basically just expanded that area to be a sitting area for that retail store that goes in, whether it be a small bakery or something of merchandise, mercantile use. You can sit out there and have a couple chairs, have a couple tables, small cafe, something of that nature that can go in there, and you can have now a sitting spot versus just coming in, parking, and leaving. So.
Can you indicate better the area that you're talking about?
Yeah,
Or
so,
maybe Ann can?
thanks, Ann.
Okay, that area.
Ann, can you go to page 246 of the PDF, the one
Sure.
that has color? That may help us.
Is that the landscape plan?
I believe
Oh, it
so.
could be, yeah, I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
There we go.
There we
Yep.
go. So that area right in front of where it says retail, right there, it's a nice area right there that we can provide some, tables, chairs. It's nice because it's kind of out of the main circulation path, so to speak. It'd only be people coming into the drive-through really going that direction. So it's a nice spot that I think will work out well. There's some landscaping that we're able to tuck in there as well versus making it just all concrete. So we're going to have some landscaping there as well as a buffer from that landscape drive. And as you can see, since we are on the landscape plan, we're providing a lot of landscaping, especially on the east end there. And touch base on it a little bit. We're going to make some modifications to this as we move along. Some of the trees there, it may be a little too dense, so we're gonna work with your staff members there to make sure that that's right. But we just wanted to make sure that we got as much landscaping in there as we could. Also, too, she touched base, some of the mature trees that are there, there's only, I think, 2 or 3. Couldn't save them. They're evasive, or 2, they were to a point where they really couldn't be saved to keep those. So, from a landscape setup, just because we're on this page right now, I think it poses some, really positive things here for this site, especially from what it is now to what it will become for landscaping. And if we could go, let's go look at, first, any questions or anything on that? Landscape-wise? No? Let's go to the renderings. So let's talk a little bit now about the building. We wanted to use a lot of different materials here that, pretty much create a play on facade, right? So versus just the standard brick building, standard, stucco building, we're trying to use a lot of the materials that are approved and give this building some wow factor. So one of the first renditions that we had was Starbuds, and the building almost looked like one giant building. And we didn't want that to occur. We kind of wanted to have some differential between one tenant and the other tenant, just like you see in a lot of shopping centers, right, where they're changing that facade up on each tenant, so to speak, for larger facilities, just to give that person their own, standout look. So Starbuds will have their own look, as you see there. That consists of mainly a stone wainscoting on the bottom, and on the other sides, pretty much on, if you could, and just, let's keep changing. We'll change to each side here. Should be multiple sides. There we go. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, so what we're looking at here, this side here is facing Burlington. The front of the building that we're calling the front, that's on the west end, is off to the right side. That's kind of out of view, tucked around the corner. This end over here, the east end, is actually a mimic of the west end. We did that on purpose. So I'm sure you may have seen other buildings where they do have the back of the building on the street. There's one actually on Route 83, I think in Willowbrook. They did it, and it's horrible. It's just one facade It's blank. There's back doors that are the metal doors with the numbers on it saying, you know, to exit. There's nothing there. So we actually want to mimic the front of the building to be the back of the building, right? Because our back faces Harlem. And that's not our entrance, but we want it to look like that's our entrance. So, so you'll see very, you know, similarities between the front and the back on that end. Yeah, we're good right here. So there's a shot now from the front of the store. So that's the west end. And as you can see, right, it looks just like the other end, minus the glass, that extra glass that's on each side of the door. That would be the south end, or I'm sorry, the north end there. That's the one side that you'll see in your packet that we are asking for a variance on. That'd be our opaque glass location. You have to remember, right, this is almost like a bank. So there's a lot of secure areas in that store. Once you enter that front entrance, that front vestibule, security is tight. So we can't have glass that would be available to go right from the street level right into the facility. So for that reason, we ask, you know, for your vote here to allow that to occur. It also does another thing though. So we are also breaking up that elevation. So instead of, like, I could have easily just wrapped that, put wainscoting on it, and had two different materials, and then, you know, that would have been it. But that gives that location there a different look. It again creates that, okay, is that a, you know, storefront window? Is it an entry? Sherwin-Williams, I believe, also has opaque glass on their elevations as well that are facing south onto Burlington. This is very similar to that, except we are also creating a canopy on that as well, just to give it another extra look for that end. On here, again, you'll see we just put out coffee shop. Again, the tenant could be, we don't know what it'll be yet, but the hope is it is something of that nature, you know, somewhere where people could come, hang out, grab a cup of coffee, sit, enjoy themselves. The other reason too, I'll be honest, of why I was thinking more of a coffee shop, not only for that community, you have the train station nearby, which is close. And my office is actually close in Oak Brook Terrace to Zen Leaf, which is on 22nd Street, and there's also Starbucks that's right next door. So that also, I wanted to say that just because, too, there was a comment, which is, we all know, you know, people that go into the store, they can't go outside and just start using the product, you know, outside the store. When I go to Starbucks every morning in Oak Brook, I've never seen an issue, never had people sitting outside that store. So, you know, I'm there probably, unfortunately, 5 times a week. So, and there's really never any, you know, groups of people hanging out or any issues with that. So I did think about that in the beginning when we started to think about making that sitting area out there, but I instantly started realizing that I'm at Starbucks every day almost during the weekend, and there's never any issues that I see over at that location. One last thing too, I do want to talk about a little bit, a couple things here. If I can stick with that facade again. We are asking for that variance for the the illuminated panels. So I apologize too. I did write down that was going to be more of a Lexan panel. I was able to get a hold of the company that actually produces and installs all of the Toyota locations. So if you're going to start noticing this more and more, there's one in Westmont, so Oak Brook Toyota, as well as the McGrath Lexus is also doing the same thing. But it's exactly what you're looking at. It's illuminated backlit illuminated panel system that's set up. It's a grid of either 2x2 or 3x3 glass panels set up on a grid, and then those panels are illuminated just for a very, just a nice glow to that system. It's not overwhelming. It's not, we did photometrics on it. It's not anything that's gonna, glow like old school neon, in a window. So everything is
Excuse
all
me.
dimmable.
You just, again, which
Yeah.
are the glowing
Oh,
panels?
that's right, yeah,
Right,
sorry.
yeah, so I just want to make sure. I
See
know.
those that whole, where you see that almost the square grid?
Yes, yes.
Those sides are going to be the illuminated panels on each side of the building.
And then on the side that faces Burlington, there'll also be illuminated panels on that side with cars?
No, don't look at that. It came out super bright. I don't know why, but that's nothing on that on that side. You will have the green and the awnings we're looking at doing. So you see the green on the underside of the awnings?
Yes.
That would be there, but those lines, those horizontal lines, that would not be there. That's not illuminated. That's just an issue with the rendering when it came through.
So the panels are on the east and the west facades of the building?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
One faces Harlem as the back end of the building, and one faces west.
Okay.
That would face the parking lot.
So then on the north side of the building, it's just a cement stucco facade?
Yeah, so that north end of the building
That
there.
faces Burlington? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to.
That's
I'm
all
trying to
right.
find
So
the end.
north,
This is north? I'm turned around.
Yes, that's west.
yeah,
Okay.
you can go back to the site plan.
The
too, that'll
Burlington
help.
side is north.
Burlington side.
The
Yeah,
Burlington
so.
side, yeah, okay.
So that is
No,
just
thank you.
stucco, okay? Cementitious stucco on that end. You'll have the canopy, metal canopies. You'll have the opaque glazing because of the fact that where those are located inside the Starbuds, it's within the merchandise behind the counter, and part of it is also close to the safe area, so that will have to be completely blacked out. So no chance of anyone seeing. And it's also obviously the reason for that is, of course, behind that glass, it's a continuous wall. It's a security wall that we have to do in a certain way that you don't want to see what's behind there in regards to material. So that would be blacked out. And like I was stating, the Sherwin-Williams to the north of us has that same look. If it was actually in the photo that she showed, you can see what that looks like. And then below that is a cut stone. So so it's basically on that facade, there's really only two materials, so to speak. One's cementitious stucco, and the base is the cut stone.
Okay. And what's in between where they meet? Is there a?
So that white line that's really showing up now is white, but that is really just an expansion joint.
Okay.
So there's nothing there, there's no light there, there's nothing.
Okay. And maybe, I don't know if you're going to get to this later, but
Yeah.
if you can discuss, like the uplights there, and then where is the green light coming from? Are those like
That's
downlights from the
just
canopies?
Yeah, as you can see, it's just real dim. It doesn't even make it to the ground usually, and that's just underneath the canopies.
So those are like LED lights or something?
Yeah, correct. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
And then the uplights from the ground, are those going to be there? Landscape lights, or is that just
Depending,
part of the
yeah, we're
rendering?
hoping, just to give it some landscaping lighting along that side there. So the renderings really these were done earlier on. They don't reflect the landscaping that's going to be there, It's something that we'll have to do. But yeah, we're hoping for some sort of uplighting there, just to give it some more look.
Well, as you consider that, just consider how, if you're trying to use the dark sky compliant
You got,
lights,
yeah,
then
correct.
this
Yep.
uplighting does do a disservice to that.
Yep, depending on how it's orientated. Yep, correct, yeah. Drive-through. So if we can look at that, again, we're also,
Which slide are you looking for?
oh, good call. Let's just go back to the site plan. I think that'll
Okay.
work.
May I ask a question, or I can wait later?
There'll be an opportunity later.
drive-through, so for that side there, basically, as you can see, it's very close to existing curb cut that's there now for the ATM. Retail on that south end, from that point, or really actually from right where you enter all the way around to the east end where the actual pickup window would be, we have plenty of stacking, which is nice. You know, we've all been to the drive-throughs where there's hardly any stacking capability.
By
The
stacking,
meaning
you mean
cars.
vehicles in a
Yeah, the
row.
ability for cars to stack up. You also have to remember too, there's a couple things on this. The state is currently in process of passing this. It's not passed yet, but they are in the process of passing this. So this is set up to go for the drive-through once it passes. We're anticipating it to pass. I currently am also doing 2 other dispensaries right now for a different client, and that is the new norm, it seems like. So they must be very confident that this is going to pass. But we are taking over bank facilities, older bank facilities, and older restaurants, Arby's, Wendy's, Taco Bell's, to prepare for the drive-through allowance. If for some reason it didn't pass, this would become more of a loading, loading area for the facility, for the back retail and the back dispensary for delivery of goods. But we do not anticipate that to happen. It most likely will go through.
Is it used for delivery during off hours then, or?
No, so we have a loading zone that's in the front there. You know, I don't want to speak, or if after, during off hours, we may use that as a drop-off point for security reasons. You know, we may use that. Again, you have to remember, right? So this is a little bit different. A drive-through here, we're all used to seeing a drive-through for a Starbucks, a restaurant, right? So you're thinking like, okay, well, people are always going to be there. They're going to be in the morning. They're going to be at night. During the off hours, that could be used as a location for the vehicle. It's an unmarked vehicle to come and drop off product and pick up cash at certain times, but off times, not at a point where obviously there's someone that's coming into the drive-through to pick up goods. The picking up of goods too is also different than what we're thinking, right? For a drive-through, for Starbucks or a restaurant where you could be there for 3, 4, maybe who knows, 5 minutes or more, depending on the restaurant. This pickup is fairly quick. It's fairly quick on how this pickup would work for product. So cars will be going in, not sticking around too long, and then leaving. So that stack up also is nice to have. We're calling it a stack up, but we don't expect it to be a large stack up there. Parking is also obviously much more than what is allowed per code. I think the only thing, Ann, right, we touched on is the, I think we're shy on the amount of islands, landscape islands here. So in my, experience with working with dispensaries, parking is very important. There's a facility that I'm doing now, that we're doing in Westmont. And again, at that location, we have plenty of parking, which is nice. And the trustees and the board members in Westmont loved that fact, because there's a facility I won't name that's down the road where they, I think, have 10 parking spaces, and somehow they allowed it at the time. And they are kicking themselves for not, for allowing that facility to go in, because there is no parking And it's causing some serious issues there with the lack of parking and circulation. So the parking is important. So I think that the landscape plan on how we have it has plenty of landscaping, and it's set up in great areas for the landscaping. And so, to take even 2 or 3 parking spots away for a landscape island with such a, enclosed facility here, I think would not be a good idea, in my professional opinion, working on with other dispensaries. There is one other thing. I apologize. I meant to upload it, and you can kick me later for it, but I did not upload the dumpster corral. So-
I wondered about that.
Okay.
You do call it out as a.
I know, so it
you
will,
get the- yeah.
it will meet all the requirements there. It'll be a wood, reinforced gates, wood dumpster corral, on metal posts, with a concrete, we'll call that out too, if it's not there now. I always call out for that pad to be concrete with a concrete apron in front. So it will have that on there, but that will be wood and reinforced gates as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With regard to the drive-through, do you anticipate the drive-through customers ordering at a sign, or are they going to be ordering at the window? And where would that sign be?
Sure. So, not yet, but we will have probably signage, yeah. So just like, yeah, Westmont, okay. So at this time, we're not sure how, again, we're in that area of trying to determine how we want to do that, via regulations and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're able to do a sign, then yes, we definitely will have a sign. And that sign will either be just to the south on the retail end, or we will be able to put that possibly just right, correct, almost right where that cursor's at. We'll be able to put that sign there. So you'll get two to three cars stack up there before you get to the actual checkout window. Or, yeah, checkout window.
I have the visuals that you sent this afternoon. Do you want me to bring those up?
Of what items?
The photos of the other, like the panels, the buildings with the panels. Do you want to display those or?
Yeah, the pink one is a good one,
pink one?
I
Okay.
think.
Got them all kind of stacked up here so we can go through.
So, that's actually, that'll work too.
Yep.
So this is one of the setups. So Novum is the company, and crazy enough, as an architect, we get into some of these situations where, how am I going to build this thing? How are we going to do this so it looks right, it's professional, it's well done, well constructed? How are we going to do this? So I've been to the dealership over in, the Toyota dealership over in Westmont, which was kind of annoying because they of course came out trying to sell me a car, and I'm just there to touch the material, and so I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is not just some metal with some glass panels in it. That's how I found out it was glass. There was a lot more to this than just some flimsy metal aluminum setup. So I reached out to the gentleman who does our photometric drawings, and he's like, hey, I know who does all those facilities. So he gave me the name and number of the gentleman who works at the company that does all of the Toyota dealerships in the nation. And so he sent me just a couple screenshots, and so that happens to be an illuminated panel. It's fully dimmable, you can control it however you want. This one happens to have 3 sides to it. We're really only dealing with one side, so it makes it a little bit different than what's shown here. But you can see though that it's almost an architectural feature versus like a backlit old school panel that you saw at monument signs, right, where you had just that tenant sign and then it's backlit. So there's some architectural features to this, as you can see, versus just a general paneling. So that would be, like you were asking, Jacqueline, on those 2 sides of the building, east and the west.
Okay, that would be the material.
That will be the material, yep, close to it, correct.
And you know the light emitted from the panel and how much it will be?
Yeah, we ran photometrics on it. It's not as bad as you would presume it to be. And we've ran the photometrics on those. Oh. That's actually, okay.
There's
Do you
a
want a different
couple
page?
there's a
Yeah,
couple
there's a couple
renderings at the
renderings.
end,
Go towards the.
253. Page 253.
I've lost my page number here.
Yeah.
Are these the ones you were looking for, Brian? Nope.
No, they're not.
Okay. I've got the
Because
ones that you
those
sent me.
don't, that only shows the signage.
Okay.
So we have one, that shows, as you can tell, it only shows the signage, that does not show the paneling on there. But we do have that shown for what that'll be. So photometric-wise, we will have that done to show what the photometrics are for that, you know, the bleeding, so to speak, onto neighboring properties. It does not create an issue from east and west from those panels.
Just a note for the, I believe, yes, they're called out on this panel. I noted the areas where
Oh, there you go.
the light based on this exceeds 1 foot candle, where at the property line, so these don't exceed 1 foot. If they're boxed in red, they do exceed 1 foot. So there's some areas based on this photometric plan, which is this,
Yeah.
all of the site lighting or just the sign?
That, I believe that photometric plan is only site lighting along with the signage on the buildings.
Okay.
But not the panels on each side.
Okay.
So, again, as you know, we will have that set up, to show. The red boxes do show that we are, yes, we are over that photometric, foot candle. But be aware, right, we don't have residents here. We do have just on the south end there, that's the BNSF, property, which is parking. Actually, we still have probably another 15 feet to go before we get to the property line there. So those boxes are that's actually taken at the drive-through, at the curb cut, not on the property line.
I believe that is the property line, I think so.
No,
there
we
was-
still have another 10 feet to go down there.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, but I believe, I can't read it, maybe you can zoom in, and I don't know what the difference is of foot candles.
Sure, it's, so
Oh, there you go.
along there ranges, yeah.
So we are under the 1 foot,
I'm not quite sure.
1 foot candle on the property line.
So
So that line there,
this is the,
correct.
on the civil plans, the property line is, I think, right here.
Oh, okay, then what's that blue line?
I believe that might be I'm not sure exactly, because the property lines here are in gray.
Okay.
So there's
okay,
the property line showing where the parking is.
Okay,
And here's
got
the
you.
property line
All right,
for the site.
okay, yeah, because I do actually see the somewhat parking striping for that. Okay, I apologize, I take it back. But yeah, we are just over 1 foot candle on that, but that does bleed onto parking on that location.
Now, I thought there was a recommendation from staff to change the light pole height from 20 to 12.
We're open to anything, yeah, we can
Yes,
do
there's-
that, correct, yeah, that would help.
And that would help that
Yeah,
issue.
for sure, yep.
There's also a recommendation to shield the backs and sides of the light post. So for example, if there's a light post, that, I believe this one, for example, none of the specs show it being shielded in any way. So if you add a shield to the back of this light post
Okay.
or on the side, to aim it in different ways, that could reduce some of the bleed over. on the
Sorry,
property lines.
to be perfectly honest, Ann, all light poles all luminaires should be shielded.
That is the requirement
That's,
in the code, so.
yeah, that's not really an option.
These figures on photometrics then are taking account of all the lighting on the property, not just
Correct.
the wall?
Not just the,
A wall
not
or a
just
sign. Okay.
not just the parking lighting and not just the signage.
This is kind of a very specific question,
Sure.
but I think there are limits on when signs can be illuminated. What do you intend, how often are these walls intended to be
So those,
illuminated?
yeah, so So really, so signage-wise, the actual signage would be illuminated during just regular, same with the curtain wall, only during regular business hours.
Only business hours.
Absolutely, yeah. it's
So
not
at midnight,
20
if someone drives by, they're not going to see the Starbucks sign illuminated?
Absolutely not.
With
no.
green lighting?
Yeah, no, no.
Okay, thank you.
Might leave the
That
landscaping
helps.
light on. We'll leave some of the sconces on, obviously for security reasons. And then you'll have the parking lot lights, just to keep the parking lot safe for after hours. But yeah, just like you have time clock. So it's a requirement too that, just from an energy code standpoint, that you have a time clock for your signage, your outdoor signage.
Okay.
I think that's it on my end.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I had another question regarding you're under contract with the village, or your client is under contract with the village to buy this property. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then I think what you said was if the state law does not change and you cannot have a drive-through facility, that's not a condition of the contract, that you have a drive-through facility on this property, and if that's not allowed, then the contract. Okay. All right.
Need to be sworn in, not sworn in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why don't we just swear you in
Just in case.
Because I feel like
Just in
Knoxville-
case.
Do you swear that the testimony you've given and will give is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for the petitioner?
I wondered if you could like scroll down a little bit. So right now, if you get off the train and you're coming, what is that road that Connie's is on, coming from Berwyn? And there's like some barricades that sort of are hanging out in that parking lot because I'm afraid people are gonna blow through that light.
I think it's Windsor you're thinking
Maybe that's right. I'm wondering if the landscaping is gonna be, and like, maybe you don't want a totally dark, like, I don't want some car to drive into this building because they didn't see, because it's dark. Because right now, there's like those big yellow parking things.
Oh, are you talking about the barricades right at the?
Yeah,
right
like
at
where you've got the
train
welcome.
tracks?
Well, where you've got the welcome, there's a road that dead ends into that garden.
I think I can bring it up on either the aerial or the site.
Are you
photos.
referring to the parking area that is directly parallel to the railroad tracks?
Stanley. It's Stanley out
So,
there.
right, see
Stanley.
see those, like all those barricades
Yeah,
right there?
Stanley.
So that's further south.
Oh,
That's a
okay,
little
okay,
bit
okay,
south.
so that's not your problem.
Yeah, that's the parking area.
So that'll just,
That's
those will
that,
just
that,
stay.
that's that BNSF
BNSF.
parking area, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was off by,
That's okay.
I
You
just-
did the same thing I do when I thought that this property line was
yeah,
further south.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, our property line is literally right where those parking bumpers are at. Yeah,
They're just so attractive.
they are, they're nice, I bet.
Thought maybe we could upgrade those.
Sorry.
The railroad is never going to upgrade that.
All right, any other questions for the petitioner?
I have another question that I guess is sort of maybe more foundational, is the zoning code, I believe, requires that you have a public entrance on Burlington. And what I think you've conveyed in the materials is that that's just impossible to do in order to put up this dispensary with a drive-through facility.
Correct.
And so, can you explain a little bit more, like, why is that impossible?
So just in the way that the square footage of the space that we need is one, we need an X amount of square feet. So, what we would end up having to do is we have to
There we go.
So basically, the dispensary comes first in regards to the building, right? That's our main focus. Trying to flip this around to where the dispensary would be on the south end brings us kind of further away from where we wanted to be. Then it would become where the retail takes precedence. And the retail then would have the drive-through. So we kind of needed to have the drive-through where it's at, not only for the layout of the building, but also if we, let's just say we had the drive-through on the north side of the building instead of the east, then we would have a drive-through lane running parallel to Burlington, and then you'd have to make an odd turn to get back onto Burlington again, through the parking lot or whatever it may be. So, and then we have, you know, then we have a pedestrian way, some sort of buffer we need to have, drive-through, then the building, and we're pushing the building so far south that we really can't make things work.
But let's say we don't know anything about the internal design of the building.
Correct.
You have exactly this thing, and people walk around to Burlington and come in through an entrance door in Burlington. Exactly everything else the same. Why is that not
There-
possible?
You just hit it on the head. The layout of the building and how we have to have it set up
Internally, you're saying?
internally. There's no way for an entrance off of Burlington Street. If we, let's just say that there, for some way there was, and we can have an entrance off of Burlington Street, then people would have to leave the facility and walk to the then so-called back of the building to get to their vehicle. And we,
What's the side of the building?
right, but the distance-wise to get back there, you know, if we were to do it, it would have to be on the far northeast corner, and you'd be walking back down the street and back into the parking lot, and for security reasons, we want to make sure that you are leaving the facility straight into the parking lot.
Okay, so I just don't understand, and maybe for some reason you can't explain it for some reason, why you couldn't just have a central main door facing Burlington, not at the northeast corner, and just have people walk around on to this public sidewalk and then enter on that side.
Because of that internal layout of the building, there's safes there. There's a huge safe. The safe room is twice the size of this room.
And the safe room cannot be put in another part of the,
Not the way the layout is, no.
right, but so why can't the layout be changed? I mean, that's what I'm having trouble with. So I mean, I think we need some evidence as to why we
What's the
can't.
benefit of having a door, an entrance on Burlington?
Because it's, I believe the zoning code requires a primary entrance for a facility to be on the street, not on the side. I mean, the whole idea was we're oriented towards the street and not like a big box store
Yeah.
kind of design.
That is a requirement in the zoning code. The idea is to create a lively streetscape by having an entrance there.
I don't know which variation it is that, what references, but
Number 4, under
to allow the building to have public entrances at locations other than the primary street frontage. 10-5-6.
Yes.
So, this, how much larger is this building than the current building at, further down?
Oh, wow. Then you're existing 2.5 times the size? 2.5 times the size, correct.
So the current building is 2325, and this is
So 2.
4090.
Yep, twice as big, which requires twice the amount of safe room space.
By law or by desire, or by the amount of product you want to have stored?
Correct, by the amount of product that we have to have in the store, given that square footage and the safe size to accommodate that. By law, you have to have the right amount of safe size to fit the product that you have from the floor into the safe.
And all of that is related to the square footage of the structure.
Correct, yes, yep.
To Commissioner Miller's point, it seems like you could look a little harder at a corner entrance. Corner being that northwest corner.
And then, so then it would be a change of the facade then too as well. We'd have to look at the whole building as a whole, of how
So then
that would
you'd
be.
want to flip
Does-
the lights, would then want, you'd want.
I don't want to, yeah, we
you'd want
don't
them
want
to
to
be
do
on the
that.
front.
We want those lights to be facing Harlem and facing the parking lot. We don't want those to illuminate. We're so close to that north property line that that will be another issue then if we do that. And I'm not sure, does Sherwin-Williams have a entrance off of?
No.
Okay.
No, they do not.
Okay. Just,
Where is their entrance?
It's on
inside the parking lot.
Yeah, it's on the side.
Off the parking lot.
All right, any other questions for the petitioner?
One other question I have. So are there going to be any other signs on the property? I can't read the tiny little plan, besides the ones on the building.
No.
Any pole signs,
At
monument
this time,
signs?
no. There is a potential for a monument sign at the northeast corner of the Village of Riverside Welcome Garden, but that is not our signage.
Okay.
So our signage that's on the building now is what we will have. There was questions of whether or not we are going to provide additional signage, that we are allowed up to 100 square feet. But again, we're trying to make this building not a box with a bunch of signs on it. We want to just make sure that we're doing it in the right way and at the right locations that are for high visibility.
Okay, I don't have anything else.
All right, any other questions for the petitioner?
And all the permeable pavers are designed to comply with MWRD requirements?
Correct.
You said you have an excess of parking based on zoning.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
based on zoning. It's actually, I mean, Riverside actually is much better, I'll admit that, than most municipalities. Westmont, for instance, I think they only require us to have 8 parking spots for the entire facility, which is just not, there's no way. You can't do that. So they technically could have approved us at that, but we know, right, that we can't have that. We wouldn't want to do that. So this is nice that we're able to fit this much parking in here and have this much parking in here.
What's your, I mean, you have other facilities. What's your kind of experience for parking spaces versus square footage? And how does this compare?
Yeah, so this is much better. Well, I should say that we've gotten to a point now where, again, let's say that the village requires 6 to 8 parking spaces for that facility. We're showing 18 to 20. And that's a good amount of parking spaces where you have probably about 60% of that, 75% of that being utilized. Again, dispensaries, as you may or may not know, are also a very quick in and out, much different than a sit-down restaurant or somewhere where people are going to be sitting there for 3 hours or so. So we took that into account as well. We do have this possible retail location, but it's very small. It's only 1,400 square feet. So when you get down to it, you're not going to be able to fit people in that facility as a true sit-down restaurant of some sort. There may be one table for 4 people or some sort of little benches there, but that's about it. So there's not a lot of people that can truly stay there for a long period of time. And between that and the dispensary itself, that's a quick in and out. You're not there very long, getting product and then leaving right away. And then especially once if this drive-through comes forward, then that'll be another help, so to speak, right? That we're not having people parking to go in. They can go through the drive-through and leave right away too. So that helps. And then for us, we'll be fine. We'll definitely be fine on this facility. We'll be fine on the other facilities I've done, but facilities that still have only 8 to 10 parking spaces are still gonna have problems.
There's a big difference though between 8 to 10 and 18, so.
Yeah, right. So yeah, we have a good amount.
How many people are working, like your peak hours, like given the staff and security that you need, how many people are already there?
5, 6 people.
So 5 or 6 cars are going to be there for staff?
Or off-street parking.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. So it's not, again, if you had, let's be honest, if this was I know things would change, but if it was a 5,000 square foot location for like a restaurant where, you could have 15 employees or 12 employees working there taking up, a lot of these spaces, it'd be a problem, so. And that's not how we design either. Like he knows, like if this was a small space, he's usually beat me up for locations they look for, and I'm like, no, not gonna work, you know, come on, it could work. No, it's not gonna work. But this was a good site. And again, we looked at the building that's there now, but the condition of it is beyond repair.
It's beyond financial
That's it,
feasibility.
thank you. That is a much better way to say it,
Just
beyond financial repair.
How does the height of your building compare to the building that's there? Do you know?
I think our peak, and if you go to the elevations, I think we're at 20, what is it, 25 or 28 feet to the very peak of the building, but again, it fluctuates right from top to bottom.
I'm gonna try and include your elevations.
I don't think you did.
Oh, I apologize.
I think there may be a
It's in the
some,
Reference.
there's a summary at the beginning, Anne, where some of the staff analysis that talks about the building height.
I can also see if I can open up the elevations.
I can't remember what.
I think last minute today, I sent those. If you want to just pull up just the elevations on that.
I think I've got them.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
So how far off was I? Am I close?
Yeah, can you
Yeah,
read those
28
off?
feet.
Sure.
Thank you. So 28, can you,
Mine's still-
28
This is
feet to
28,
the,
yeah.
28 feet to the
That's
top
to
of the
very-
Starbud
yeah,
sign?
Yeah,
And then,
and again, remember, that's only the east and west ends at that signage. The rest of the building on the north, I'm sorry,
everything not including the signs?
yeah, everything but the signs is down to, call it 25 feet. Right,
Thank you.
and then even less when you get to let's just call it the coffee shop.
What's the coffee shop?
That would be at approximately 21 feet. So we're less than what was there before, so to speak.
Do we know
That
what it was
two-
before?
It was a
It's a
two,
two-story.
like
Yeah.
two,
It's a
2.5-story building.
Two-story.
So
20
we're close, we're really close.
22, maybe.
So that's taller.
You're comparable, or
Yeah.
maybe a touch higher, but not
Right,
significantly different.
yeah.
Yeah.
And probably comparable to the Sherwin-Williams too, which is a two-story.
Yeah, that one is, I think, a 1+.
Yeah, there it goes.
It should be around there.
Sherwin-Williams is probably more like 18.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where that's maybe, probably about
Yeah,
8
yeah.
feet lower than what we are.
Is that height necessary?
I was just gonna say, what you doing up there?
Utilizing what we can.
Is it necessary to have it that
Yeah,
tall?
for signage wise, yeah.
Oh, for signage.
Signage and, yep, correct. And also too, remember, we're inside the facility, we're at 16 feet. We want to try and utilize that height inside the facility. And then you figured your 2 feet for structure, 2 to 3 feet for structure. So we're at 18 feet. And then we want to hide all the mechanicals on the building. So at 25 feet, we want to make sure that they're all hidden, because we all know then we
So
have to
some
put
of
in
that's
those wonderful
parapet.
screens up there.
So as
Yeah.
Commissioner Peltier said, that's actually parapet, not so much that the roof.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I'm sorry. So, yeah, back to the elevations, it'll show you, there's 2 dash lines that run through there, there's your height. So that you're at 16 feet, 2 feet for the actual bar joist structure. So then you're at a parapet up there of about 7 feet, which the mechanical equipment gets to be about 5.5 feet tall.
Okay.
And to be honest, I've ran through it in other municipalities where it's been, where's the line of sight? Is the line of sight at the curb? Is the line of sight from across the street? Where is it at? And we've been within a foot and had to put in, $8,000 worth of wonderful screening to hide the top foot of the equipment. So we want to make sure that the building is just set up to not have that issue. And we are within the height limitations of that zoning. We are allowed the height too, yeah.
Any more questions for the petitioner? All right. At that time, we can move on to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? All right, at this time, anyone who's planning to speak, we can swear you in all at once. Would you stand, please, and raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge? Yes. Thank you. All right, and one by one, you can come to the podium and introduce yourselves.
You guys are lucky enough to hear me twice today. I'm a financial advisor. I opened up my business in town a little over 6 months ago. I'm directly across the street from where this proposed project will be. I'm excited to not have to look at a vacant building anymore. However, the moving of the building is also going to drastically change the street parking with the new curb cutouts there. And I'm just curious if there's any consideration around that, because to I guess it would be the north of us, there's a doctor's office, there's surgeons and professional offices all along that street, and most of those use a lot of street parking. Our parking lot that we have in our building is quite tight, so a lot of my clients park on the street and walk across the street to our office. We're 362. So there's 4 or 5 spots directly in front of the vacant building right now that a lot of my clientele use that will be going away, essentially. So I don't know if we can use their parking lot for our clients or if that's going to be just for their building or what, but that's just a concern I have for other businesses in the area where their clients may park, because a lot of them use that street parking, and this will drastically change that. But that's all I have.
Hi, my name is Louis Fridrich. I'm at 344 East Quincy, directly across the way from there. We're very concerned about the drive-through. We take the beating on that street from Minuteman. The gas station was not Minuteman anymore, but from the gas station now, and they're going to go through Quincy and Burlington. They're going to flip around there. I would rather not have a drive-through, but it sounds almost like you guys aren't going to be able to control that after a while. I'm all for building and beautifying the neighborhood, but we're really concerned about the traffic of a drive-through. I mean, the lights shine in our yard against our house, and now, just from those couple cars parking in those office buildings across the way. They shine right through our kitchen most of the time. But yeah, so I'm really concerned that we put a drive-through in there and to increase the traffic in that area. It's just a nightmare now. I can't see what it's going to be like if we allow them to put a drive-through in that area.
Thank you.
Okay?
What did he say his address was?
I'm Pat Frederick, and I'm right behind there too. I'm worried about all the cars. Do you realize when a train comes and stops, some of the cars go from, Burlington all the way back to Ogden sometimes, especially when we have 2 or 3 trains. And we're gonna have more traffic with this. Not only that, I'm worried about any thefts or robberies. This brings another kind of clientele in the neighborhood, and we really don't need any more of that. We have enough with, like he said, the gas station, and then people parking. He's gonna offer parking. How do you know the people from Burlington train won't park there? They are parking down the block now. That's true, they do too, but they don't. You start out that way, but, and I go past your place on Harlem Avenue, and I do see people using their product there. And I do see them come out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell. So it doesn't make me feel comfortable that you're gonna have all this traffic coming back on Harlem.
Hi, my name's Ian.
Sir, I'm sorry, can you speak in the microphone so we can get it for the recording? Sorry to make you go through there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Andy Sitkowitz, and I'm also immediately across the street and very familiar with the area. The biggest issue with this, and I'm not really opposed to anything that I've heard, but can you go to the slide where it shows the rendering as it is?
Sure. Wait, the photo of the site as it is, or the rendering of what is
The,
proposed?
the new rendering.
Oh, sure.
You can go back to the actual like blueprint picture.
Oh, the bird's eye view of the
Yes.
layout of the site?
The plan
Okay.
view.
Yeah, with the
Looks
drive-through that comes out, people coming down Burlington heading east cannot see that car because it's blinded by the building. So, and then people turning right, going west on Burlington, could see a car coming right out into their traffic. So there has to be some type of system or whatever where people can see better, and then the people coming east on Burlington can have greater warning of those cars coming out, because it's completely blocked by the building as it is. And people generally speed up to make that light, sometimes going very fast, 30, 40 miles an hour. So that egress out of the drive-through has to be there. It's a little bit cumbersome the way it is right now. And if there's cars parked on Burlington, it only blocks people's vision even more for the people coming out of the dispensary or the people coming on Burlington or turning into Burlington. So there has to be some system there that allows that to happen easily. And with trains and things like that, yeah, it'll occasionally back up, but the entrance or the exit of the drive-through is very close to the intersection where people may be looking at the light and not necessarily at ground level and things like that. So that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, everything looks good to me.
Hi, I live at 397 Herrick. If you pull up an aerial, my property is the pool, that dirty pool. And from my bedroom on my second floor, I look out on that property. And so I really don't want to see anything lit up. I really can see that vacant building, and it is very ugly, but I really don't want to see until 10 o'clock at night or at 8 in the morning that very big visual or the big glowing building, because the sides are going to be glowing. I hate to say it, I look young, but I really am. I really wish we could do something better on that property. I really do. I know it's ugly and it just doesn't do anything for us right now, but the egress, ingress, like he said, I live on Herrick, and there was a record store across the street on Harlem Avenue, and I don't know, 2 cars went through that record shop. And let me tell you something, I garden at night, and that's the only time when it's very quiet, but I still hear a lot of ambulances, there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of traffic, loud noises, and I just think that Harlem Avenue right there is such a bottleneck already. And I take the train to go downtown. I'm not really going to look forward to walking and seeing this, getting on and off the train. I'm not looking forward to that at all. 25 years ago when I bought this house, I bought it because of the schools and the great things about Riverside. And the grammar school was 3rd in the state. And my kids they still live there. I don't know how safe it's going to be, but we're very concerned about this right now. And I think that, I think we could do better. We have that bottleneck. Traffic is so bad with trains, day and night. I hear it all the time. And I see that building, and I'm really going to see it again. And I don't look forward to it at all. I don't like it. I wish it was lower. I just hope that we don't have like a City of Chicago Trump signage issue, that it's going to be too big, too bright for Riverside. We have gas lamps. I love it. We don't have a lot of lights in the neighborhood. It seems safe, but I don't know what it's going to bring. And that coffee shop where people are gonna be hanging out, but you really don't want them to hang out. I'm a little confused about the whole usage of this space. And I definitely don't want to drive through. I definitely don't want to drive through. I don't like it at all. But I'm very concerned about my safety, and I think this is sad for Riverside because I think we could do better in bringing in family-oriented businesses to the community. And thanks, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen and go through all this. I find it fascinating, but I live here, and I'm really impacted and very worried, and I want you to know that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hicks. Three general topics. First one is nuisance lighting. Second one is traffic. I didn't think it was going to be. And the third is public safety. The thing I enjoyed about Riverside, I really liked moving here, was because there was so little light. And this is a monument to light pollution. I mean, even though we've done all the lumen tests and those sorts of things, it's going to be glowing for, what, 10 to 8, whatever, how many 16 hours a day or whatever that is. And it will be broadcasting through that entire area over there, as well as probably into Berwyn. And while it's always a business's ability to, or rather, right to advertise, they're missing a big advertising opportunity by not sending it towards the train. People on the train going, wow, that's a Starbucks. I can go there. I can get off the train, get some, get back on the train. They're missing that. They're just putting it on a street and then broadcasting to the neighborhood. So I think there's just too much light pollution here. Second point was the traffic. Not the car traffic. There's a lot of rail traffic. There's a lot of people traffic in that area, which is much different than I think any of the other Starbucks locations are. So their model of building it like it's at, Oak Brook doesn't really pattern against this, because they're trying to create a nice little coffee shop. No one's going to go to that coffee shop. I bet anybody here that if that coffee shop goes in, it will not last more than 6 months. And you'll have multiple occasions, just like we've seen in town, small coffee shops don't make it. Third is the public safety. I'm not worried about the people manufacturing or consuming or buying the marijuana. I'm talking about the fact that this is an urban area, and it's very possible that you will attract a criminal element who will be preying upon people that are carrying cash. That area has had some really strange crimes occur. You've had people trying to steal ATMs. Best case scenario, they try and escape down Harlem. Worst case, they head down Burlington. That's happened a couple of times, and people have discovered that when you hit a tree on Burlington with your car, you die, and that has happened a couple of times. So, please consider the fact that it's a monument to to light pollution, and the fact that, I just don't want anybody killed. That's it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right. Everyone is done speaking. I'll have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now I'll open the floor for discussion amongst the commission members.
I could start with a few comments. These are not particularly organized or anything, but I suppose the first thing that occurred to me when I reviewed this was that this is in the B1 TOD, which we just very recently approved. And I have to say, when I read what the intent of the B1 TOD was, this is not what I would have envisioned. I would have envisioned a single building that would have had a mixed use, retail, residential, all the rest. This is going to be a single-use property, retail property. And it seems to me it kind of takes away an opportunity, as some public here has said. I mean, we don't control development, but it does seem to be taking away an opportunity for a true mixed-use development in this area, where you would have restaurant, retail, residential on higher stories and all the rest. So that, I was disappointed in seeing that. And then some of the variations here, I think, and the issue that has been brought up by, again, some of the members of the public regarding that exit lane of the drive-through right near Burlington. It does get congested. I don't go down there that often, but I do sometimes, and it does get quite congested there, both at the light and because of the train tracks and the frequent stopping of the train in that area. And so I'm kind of wondering, to me, I have some trouble not thinking that the site plan could be developed differently so that the drive-through exit is not right there, so that the building is oriented differently, and that could be partly not having that retail space there, which would allow the building to be oriented differently on the lot, and perhaps the drive-through oriented. So those are some of my initial thoughts about the site plan and the variations that are being requested.
Yes, John.
Yeah, so just briefly, I mean, this was touched on earlier. I mean, this is a cannabis dispensary is a legal use here. I mean, and I think that we're getting, it's not really our place to judge what type of business goes here. I mean, this, it is what it is. So I just want to kind of pull it back and focus on the variations that they're asking for. I mean, I think that's really the only thing. I mean, as much as, I mean, I get it. I mean, there's certainly, and I think we will talk about them. The light pollution issue is significant. I mean, people have brought that up. That makes a lot of sense. The curb cutouts, I thought about that. But I mean, this can be built. So, just putting that out there that, this is what we have.
Well, there are some elements to site plan approval that deal with traffic circulation, pedestrian safety, those kinds of issues, as well as compatibility with the zoning district that the building is being put in. So I'm a little unclear on how all that works in, but I do think those are issues worth considering, that they are relevant to the requirements for the site use plan at least.
I normally like to give everyone else a chance to speak before I jump in, but I'm going to chime in early this time, because I do have some concerns with the site plan as proposed, as well as a few of the variations. The way that the drive-through is designed, with the fact that cars exiting the drive-through cannot see pedestrians walking along Burlington until they're on the sidewalk, that is a definite issue that would need to be fixed, so that we don't have that conflict there, regardless of what the drive-through user was. So that's something that I would definitely want to see changed. And just sort of in general, aside from that, the general layout of the site works for a drive-through business, but if the state does not approve whatever's necessary to allow a dispensary to have a drive-through, and this moved forward without a drive-through, this is not at all how I would want this to see the site designed. If there weren't the need for a drive-through, I would want to see the building up against the street with those pedestrian entrances along Burlington and or Harlem, really getting that pedestrian-oriented feel that the transit-oriented development district was designed to encourage. So while this, in concept works for a property with a drive-through, without the drive-through, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think it works nearly as well. A few other general thoughts. I don't really see that retail space will be a particularly viable retail space given its location on the site and its visibility. As it is right now, you'll only be able to see signage for traffic that's going eastbound on Burlington for a very brief moment as they pass between the buildings. So it will be very difficult to see that there is another business there. And that could be remedied by putting additional signage on Harlem, but that again is going to be adding additional signage to the sites, which I'm not sure if that's something that we want to see. If there was a desire for this to be a multi-tenant building, I think there's other ways that it could be laid out to give better visibility to both tenant spaces rather than having it all go to one use at the sacrifice of the other one. And then finally, the variation for the building material. I think it's interesting, it's something different, and I think it can definitely work along Harlem, but to propose that on the western facade of the building, you know, really facing into town, that's another story. You know, obviously facing Burlington Street and directing towards that traffic, it's not nearly the same as going along a state route on Harlem. So I don't think it's appropriate really to have something that's going to be so bright and glowing. I know we're not talking about signage at this particular meeting, that is expected to come forward in the future, but that signage is much larger than I would want to see directed towards our smaller scale, lower intensity uses as you move west on Burlington Street. So, you know, the general idea of that material I think works, but the way they have it proposed to be on both the west and the east facades, I don't know that that's appropriate in this location. So just a few general thoughts that I had on the proposal.
I've long thought that we need a coffee shop on that corner, and I have wished that I could open my own Starbucks right there. But I think that the idea that people who are walking to the train would tuck in and walk through that big parking lot, get a cup of coffee, and then go back out and around, I agree, it is just not a realistic sort of like way that you would walk your life if you were headed to the train down Harlem or around. Or if you were coming from the other way, you would have to cross the tracks, come all the way down Burlington, come in, get your cup of coffee, come back across the tracks to get to your inbound train. It like doesn't quite, I agree, I'm not sure that it would be a successful shop because of how you would have to get there. But I want a coffee shop there.
If no one has any other comment, I did have a question perhaps for Attorney Pickerel, in that the building materials, let's see, it's 10.5-6, E, building materials in the B1 district, building scale and design standards.
10.5.6?
Yeah, 10.5.6 for the B1 district. I think that's.
Yeah, E is
Would that
building materials?
apply to the B1 TOD, I think? Well, my question is that it talks about building materials, and it says the following materials are permitted for use on exterior. And then it says other materials may be considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission, provided they are not expressly prohibited below. Now, that seems like kind of strange wording to me, but it almost seems to me like we don't have any authority at this point in time to approve any other building materials that are listed, and that would include a glass curtain wall system. We can't give a variation for that. We don't have the authority, or is that not true?
So it is a little awkwardly phrased, I'll admit it, but yeah, these, they would not, so they're the prohibited ones, so no matter what we say, we can't have any of the prohibited ones. The ones, A, B, and C, they don't require any planning or zoning commission input. If it's anything other than that, typically you will require some zoning relief in this form of variation. I believe we're getting, that, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of the requested variations for the materials, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be the appropriate mechanism.
Either the glass curtain wall or the Lexan, whichever.
Yeah.
But those are prohibited, so we cannot
We're
give.
not discussing Lexan anymore because the architect noted that they have an option for glass.
Yeah, I think it was.
But then Ann said
It's
at the
glass.
beginning that that would be considered a glass curtain wall, is that right?
Yes, because it's not a structural element. It's not a structural part of the wall.
So I guess my point is, the way I'm reading the ordinance, we don't have, PZC doesn't have the authority to to grant a variation for a glass curtain wall system.
As a note, I believe the reference to the Planning and Zoning Commission was put in when the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed site plans exclusively without the benefit of the village board, and it's kind of a remnant that was not removed when that review went to the village board. So the reference specifically to the Planning and Zoning Commission probably should be updated, as well as the language in that section of the code. It just seems unclear.
That is, I mean, it is a little circular here, and let me just check.
So maybe we just need some
Let me-
guidance at some point.
Yeah, ultimately, when you want to get a variation, if I remember correctly, language for a variation allows you to vary any provision of the zoning code, which is inclusive of all of this. Let me pull it up. Let me just be 100% sure I'm right on this. Give me just one moment, please. Yes, so the authority in specific cases where there's practical difficulties, particular hardships in carrying out this strict letter of the regulations of this zoning code. Yeah, so by variation, we can vary any of the standards in the zoning code.
Including the prohibited materials.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Ann. When they were building Sherwin-Williams, did they get a special use permit with regard to the fact that their entryway is off of, not on a street, and that they used opaque light, windows as well, or glass?
You know, I believe, and I could be mistaken, I'm happy to be corrected by anyone who has more experience in the village than I do. I believe the approval for the Sherwin-Williams predated the change to the code that required a public entrance on the street, so a variation was not required from that section of the code, because the TOD amendments were approved after the Sherwin-Williams building.
All right.
That sounds right.
Any other comments or questions or discussion?
I would just second of the other's opinion with regard to that retail space. I don't think it is positioned in a manner that will encourage foot traffic, or I don't see any commuters wanting to dip in to get coffee and then go around the dispensary to catch the train. There's no other way to do it. It's not like that they can cross the drive-through, and as well as the barrier where the railroad has its parking. I think it's set up to fail where it's at. And there's no signage for it off of Harlem.
And I would just echo some other comments, is the lighting is definitely a concern from the standpoint of the level of lighting, the fact that there's uplighting, lighting that is directed toward into, I guess, Riverside as opposed to out toward Harlem, and even along the railroad tracks. I mean, there's residential, to the south. So the whole kind of glowing walls, though architecturally are interesting, I think they're very concerning. The light pollution at the south property line seemed to be excessive. It seemed like it was up at 2 point something at the actual property line. So that seems, we should address that. I would prefer to have an entrance on Burlington, although I understand there may be some restrictions with regard to the operation of the building. But that facade, the way that it's presented to us, is too monolithic and kind of uninteresting from the Burlington side. It looks like the side of a, warehouse or Osco, whatever. There definitely needs to be more interest there, even to kind of replicate the other two facades are more interesting than that one. With regard to, I mean, one of the variances is for the interior landscape islands. We've discussed the fact that there's more than enough parking, both according to the business owner as well as the village. So I guess I fail to understand why we can't have landscape islands if the parking's excessive. And the drive-through being that close to Harlem is concerning, and I would like at least for our engineers to comment on that, both the visibility for the pedestrians and also the traffic entering onto Burlington.
I mean, what I feel like doing is holding this in abeyance until we know if the state law is passed. Because I'm going to suspect that if it is not passed, the applicant might be more amenable to considering redesign of his site or its site.
Does Attorney Pickrell have any insight as to when this law may be passed, or when we'll have any insight as to what it happens, or is this just trapped in the state legislature? Or do you not know? Which is a fair answer as well.
I do not know what the state of Illinois is going to do. I wish I did.
No, I'm just more in terms of timelines when things have to be decided.
Like when they close down for the day?
I don't remember where we're at in the legislative
Yeah, they don't have,
calendar,
well, I can look
but
up the
yes.
process. My understanding is that there's going to be, they're considering the next, let me look up their calendar, and I'll need to check.
If you could do that, that'd be great. I don't remember what their calendar is, so I can't say
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
good.
what is the name of this? It's HB, this will take me a few minutes to look up. One second.
Okay, so anyway, I just think that it could, so just last month or the last meeting or whatever, we went through a situation where we had an applicant that proposed certain things, and then 2 years later, it turned out that they had a different building on their site, or the building had different attributes, and that kind of changed our consideration. So I just think that in this situation, there's a lot riding this. We have a lot of questions. We've given a certain amount of feedback. It could be helpful that we, put this public hearing in abeyance, or not hold, try and make any decisions on what's been requested of us tonight.
I would agree 100% with that. I mean, you know, this entire plan is, not entire, that's unfair, but a big part of this plan is the drive-through, and the drive-through is also an issue that was raised by a lot of people who came here to speak. You know, if the drive-through doesn't happen, we're back at square one for a lot of this. I mean, I would imagine the entire footprint would, I'm exaggerating, but a significant amount of the footprint would change. So I would say until we know what's gonna happen with this, we're opining on something that's, you know, it's in the clouds right now. And I'm not even sure there's anything else we can touch on, right? And I'm not trying to avoid the issue, because I'm gonna have to come back, right? So, you know, but everything kind of revolves around this drive-through and where it is.
What I can tell you is that it was referred to the Rules Committee in last year, and there hasn't been activity since then, so I cannot tell you even when the state
No,
will
and
consider.
that's a good enough of an answer, is that we simply don't know.
And from a legal perspective, what we can do, I mean, there are options. If there isn't a legal reason we could not consider the request for a drive-through, anything that they locate there would have to comply with all laws. And if a law prohibited the drive-through, then we would have granted them, obviously, a relief that they could not fully take advantage of. So, you know, it is this, you know, board's discretion to recommend granting or recommend denial, continue it if the applicant, hearing what we've been saying, would prefer that we not issue recommendation, or would you prefer that we issue a recommendation, and that may be useful information?
Could approval of the application or recommendation of approval or recommendation otherwise of the Planning and Zoning Commission be based on the understanding that the drive-through, the commission is assuming that the drive-through will be approved by the state law? So
Yeah.
for example, you know, we are making our recommendation based on the understanding that the petitioner is confident that this will be approved by state law. Our, you know, approval may or may not be applicable, you know, if that's not the case. You know, you may or may not be in agreement with the design of the site if that's not, if it wouldn't be used for that purpose.
Right. Yeah, we could have, exactly. So if we have a contingency saying that if the state law does not authorize drive-through facilities for cannabis dispensaries, then that would render, or that.
I think that's up to the commission to say whether, you know, if this isn't going to be used for drive-through, and I believe the applicant recommended as, you know, perhaps it could be used as a loading area or changed in some way where the drive aisle is still there. I don't think the commission really discussed that as a possible use. But, you know, if, for example, the state law didn't approve a drive-through, the applicant still wanted to use that as a drive-through, you know, or some sort of access lane, that the commission could make a comment on that as a possibility as well.
Right.
Well,
Our recommendation is contingent on authorization. But, I mean, if you were inclined to recommend it at all, I mean, that's the threshold issue. But yeah, if you were inclined to recommend approval, then the recommendation could say that the drive-through aspect is contingent on the approval by, under state law.
Or if it's not approved by state law, it could be perhaps used as an access lane, depending on how the commission feels about that, but I don't think that's been necessarily discussed as an option.
Yeah, that, if there's no drive-through, then what Commissioner Peltier already said applies, and that's that this whole structure should be pushed east. I mean, I also, you know, recognize that we have no idea what the legislature's gonna do, so it's just up in the air.
Well, it could be pushed east, but also I think there have been comments that there's some lack of comfort with having that retail space, that because perhaps of its existence means that the internal organization of the building has to be such that you cannot have a public-facing main entrance on Burlington. So I think the issue of that drive-through lane impacts a lot of other things, as well as the existence of the retail space, and whether the petitioner wants to reconsider that. And then, you know, that has some impact on perhaps the two missing islands in the parking lot, because if there's no retail space and you have more room. But a lot of it is, I think there's a lot of discomfort with the potential danger posed by that drive-through lane, as opposed to it just being like a truck exit lane for, you know, a loading kind of facility. And that we'd like a little more input from someone who has expertise in traffic safety or traffic counts or whatever. I know that Public Safety Director Buckley said he didn't have any issues, but I think we at least would, I would feel uncomfortable making a recommendation without having more information about that lane.
I can't speak to the village engineer reviewing, maybe not the site distance that Commissioner Pelletier brought up, but in terms of the safety of the distance of the curb cut where the drive-through lane is in relation to Harlem Avenue, I did ask them to review the layout and the position, and they were not concerned about the new curb cut. They thought that the distance separation between that curb cut where the drive-through lane exits and its distance to Harlem Avenue, which is a little bit closer than it is now with that existing curb cut, they said that they didn't have concerns about that. And I didn't ask specifically about the site distances, but you can see the stop bar is a little bit in advance if we move up.
Yeah, the stop bar does not go all the way to the sidewalk.
Sure, so you can
it
see
could
the
certainly
sidewalk
just-
here, the building here. So theoretically, someone moving at an appropriately, hopefully slow pace, exiting the building would stop check, and then be able to cross that sidewalk and then onto the pavement. But that's, I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm just guessing.
And answer the question, on Burlington,
Sorry, Brian, could you, sorry, it's, you can't hear it on the recording if you don't speak in the microphone.
on Burlington, if you could put up the aerial.
Sure.
Obviously, this is a little different layout, right, that what's there now versus what we'll have, but where does the parking end in relation to the allowability to park on the south side of Burlington?
Sure, so the street parking.
Because you obviously, right, we have
Yep.
right turn lane right there. We have a
Yep.
right turn lane on that side, right?
That's
That
correct.
whole area, okay.
So the street parking on the south side of Burlington starts here.
Gotcha.
There's 2-hour parking.
Gotcha. So in regards to the building location and cars being parked in front of our building, that would not occur.
Well, there's room depending on how, again, I'm not a traffic engineer, but depending
No,
on how
correct.
you would want to
Like-
restripe the street. So the parking, so this is the property line here for the Burlington lot. You can see the stripes here.
Right.
So the street parking ranges from here to here right now, uninterrupted. The only uninterrupted section where you could theoretically, obviously fit 2 vehicles would be between these 2 curb
Right,
cuts.
which we wouldn't.
Whether that's advisable or not,
Yeah,
I'm
we
not sure.
wouldn't, no. Okay, gotcha. And then just one other comment, I know there was back and forth on parking and the islands, and so we have enough parking, so we should put islands in. We can't anticipate what the amount of traffic will be for the people coming here. The worst thing we'd want to do is to put islands in and lose 2 to 4 parking spaces that we could have had for patrons going there to park instead of having the landscape parking island. That's my only worry, is just to make sure that we have ample parking for that. Secondly, for the retail, I know everyone was talking about coffee shop. I happen to have the label up there as a coffee shop. We don't know what it'll be. But I can say, though, that for our Burbank location, there's a bakery attached to the Burbank location that relies upon the dispensary. And a lot of, that's how it pretty much works, right? So whatever that retail may be, they will be a retail store that will definitely want to move in there because of the dispensary. So that bakery does approximately $7,000 a month.
It becomes.
I'm sorry,
a
I'm sorry, a week, a day.
It becomes a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, it's
whatever
symbiotic
word
relationship,
you want.
correct. So I'm sorry, that coffee shop on there, but it's just an initial thought. But yes, as you start to think, yeah.
Sure, and just in terms of the parking numbers, so I visited the existing Starbucks. I've tried to keep my eye on the parking lot, and I haven't done counts of what the parking has been, and it definitely varies throughout the day. But there are points in the day, especially in the late afternoons when I've driven by, where there's been maybe 3 spaces available out of the 23 in the parking lot. That's with a smaller location, obviously, that's with a singular tenant, that's without maybe some folks parking on the adjacent parking lot and Dr. N's parking lot and the Chinese Smiles and walking over. I'm not sure how many folks do that. There are the same number of parking spaces in this lot as there would be, or as there are at the existing Starbucks location.
And that was a question I had,
Yep.
was how
It's
many?
23.
It's 20,
This has
existing
2 accessible
Starbucks
spaces.
location at Long
Yes.
Common-ish has 23 existing
With
spaces.
1 accessible space, this has 2. That's the only, in terms of
Plus-
number, the only difference.
Plus the potential sharing with Dr. N's.
That's correct. Now, you would have the benefit, there is parking on the north side. People generally don't like to walk to parking, I understand, but there is parking on the north side of Burlington. It does start right here, where approximately this car is 2-hour parking here. Seemingly to me that you'd want to maintain that parking because it wouldn't be interrupted by any changes to the site here, and then you've got street parking here. For the benefit to that being obviously also special events that Starbucks has. but-
People can park on the street, that's okay. This is an urban area,
Sure.
it's expected that you do
Yes.
not always have spaces in a parking lot.
Sure.
Well, it seems like there have been a number of issues that have been brought up that the commission's not entirely comfortable with. Given that, I think I would be surprised if we were poised to make a recommendation of approval. So the alternatives then would be to continue the case, to give the petitioner some time to possibly revise their plans if they'd be interested in doing so, or move forward with a negative recommendation. Would the petitioner be interested in making any revisions, or they prefer a recommendation this evening?
Before we do that, could we summarize, just for the benefit of the petitioner, what the issues are, to make sure that they're clear what they are and that when the recommendation's made?
I took some notes. There was a general comment that this was not a mixed-use building. We are concerned about the exit lane from the drive-through. We are concerned about the orientation of the building, that it is more parking lot focused than Burlington focused. And this plays into the idea of where exactly the entrance to the structure is. Site distance issue again. Landscaping islands and/or just maybe we need a better definition or better enumeration of exactly what landscaping area is being provided in this site plan in terms of what general requirements are. Are you going above and beyond? Are you trying to ask for too much of a variation? I don't think we have a real good clue on that. There is some concern about the retail, but give you the symbiotic relationship, whatever word I used before. There's concern about the building material, but I'm not quite sure where that landed and if the glass, the use of glass material for the glowing areas is adequate. I just thought of something, but
Lighting and its impact.
lighting. Sorry, lighting is huge. Lighting is, that's the one I forgot, sorry. Thank you, John. You guys know me. Lighting really needs to be well thought out, and the overspill is an issue, plus need a better commitment to both the neighbors in terms of how visible this is in winter when everything's lit up. Probably need a little better definition on that. What else did I miss?
I just want to point out, I mean, for me, the major issue is the lighting. I mean, it's almost a non-starter when I think of that facade of the building beaming out those bright lights towards downtown Riverside, towards the residential neighborhood. You can put as many lights as you want in Harlem and blast it out there. I don't care. But you know, anywhere where it's going to come in and interfere with people's homes, you know, that's an issue because people, you know, I mean, you have to accept change. You know, you buy something 20 years ago, things might change, but this is a pretty big change. So it's something for me to just tone it down on that side. And at least in my perspective, a lot of these other issues are things that can be worked out. You know, the curb cuts, you got to exit somewhere, right? You got to get out somewhere. So they're going to have to go out into Burlington. You can't dump people out onto Harlem. So that'll have to be addressed, but I think it's addressable. But the lighting is I mean, if you're coming back, you know, if we're going to come back, address that, at least for me.
Well, just a few further comments, if I might. For one thing, I'm confused a little bit about what about the signage? When do we consider the signage?
So the signage, because it's larger than what would be allowed, is going to be a separate signage variation that would come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we haven't talked to the petitioner in terms of time frame. I would expect that would be in July.
Okay.
I would, if I could speak to the landscape median. So we have here, the code, to some extent, double dips a little bit when it comes to parking medians. And we saw this to, I think, the difficulty of meeting the median requirement with the central houser site, where you've got a parking demand site, and then you've got the requirement for perimeter parking. So it meets the perimeter parking requirements. These are the appropriate location and number, and width, excuse me, for perimeter parking medians. These perimeter parking medians don't count towards the internal parking medians that are required. So in addition to these, for any site above 20 spaces, they would be required to have 4 medians in addition to these medians. These 2 medians are in fact oversized based on what's required. So this median here and this median here are actually quite a bit larger than what's required. So, you know, if, depending on how you see things and how you'd like to kind of divide things up, if this median were a little bit smaller and maybe they created a median in the center.
To be honest,
yeah.
and I'm speaking without.
Sure.
I would prefer the larger medians rather than trying to create little mini islands that don't
Sure.
grow for a darn.
But just to
So-
give some perspective on
But that's
size of
why
number,
a tally of what we've provided in terms of landscaping area versus what's required could be helpful.
Sure.
For instance, is there a total square footage that's
Yeah.
required,
That's what
and
I'm
is that being met?
Yeah, I believe that's in the, okay. So the interior landscape medians shall be a minimum of 144 square feet in area, a minimum of 8 feet in width. So the ones that were provided, let's see here.
I mean, more from an overall site plan.
Yeah,
Like, what would be the total landscape area, you know?
Oh,
what
the
I
amount
mean?
of green space on the site?
Yeah.
Yes.
There
I
you go.
believe that's called out in the civil plans, but I can,
I'm
Look it
trying to
up.
find it.
and just for the benefit of the applicant, would it be helpful to provide, I know that the, Brian, when you spoke, you said maybe that the lighting plan that you submitted wasn't exactly reflective of what the building would look like in the final state? Yeah, would it be beneficial to either at the commission or maybe a condition of approval to be presented to the village hall, a more accurate rendering of what the lighting would look like, maybe from a few different perspectives from the area, so that folks who maybe live in homes, you know, further away, you can see, you know, it could be visible from the neighborhoods off, you know, from the backyards of Herrick, maybe not, depending on the light levels, because I think it's also controllable. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I think you had some statistics in here. Oh, these are not your plans, I forget. All right. I know I had pervious, impervious data.
Yeah, there's pervious and impervious calcs, but it
Sure.
does not give us landscaped area. But I'm trying to read this rather.
So presumably the 72% impervious is, you know, now that doesn't include the pavers, which are another 2,400 square feet approximately. So I'm guessing about 80% of the site, based on that math. I don't know,
Sounds good.
80% of the site is permeable pavers and impervious surface versus 20% landscape area. That's a spitball figure, I could be wrong.
Thank you very much for listening to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Obviously, we're trying to figure out what we do, right? As you, yeah, obviously, there's always some things that we have to work on, or some things that some agree upon, some don't agree upon. How do we, I'm feeling that the biggest issue is the possibility of the drive-through, whether it happens or it doesn't happen. So if that drive-through, one, we don't know what the timing of that is. It's a big problem, right, for a lot of reasons. For me as a designer, client, if that drive-through is not approved, which, again, I think we will have that, but if it's not approved or it's held up forever, who knows? Administrations change, we know that's gonna happen here soon. You know, how do we go about that? If it can remain as a loading only, right, for the back of the facility, then is that an option for us to say that would remain as is, but it would be a loading lane to move forward? Or keeping it how it is so that we can continue forward with some sort of design? Or are we rolling the dice to do the design? And if it's not approved right away by the state for some reason, then we would redevelop the site, be contingent upon that to redevelop the site.
Right.
How do we do that to move forward? And I may be misspeaking. I mean, is the opaque glass on the one side going to change the ability to move forward? Is we kind of went over the curb cutting. We're good there. The lighting, I understand the lighting. We can look at that. Okay, we can look at that. If we find that from different views, different angles, that there is an issue with the lighting, the west end, we can definitely look at that. So could it be contingent upon the photometrics of that lighting? I mean, if it's not bleeding off the site, then how do we work on that?
What I'd like to say is, since that you should go forward with the current, and someone else here can disagree with me, so this is just one person speaking. But what I'd like to say is that since we do not have any insight into this drive-through situation, but it appears that it will pass at some point, that your design continues to show a drive-through. But the other issues that we brought up here are the ones that you need to address. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes, I would
I'm
say so.
seeing a lot of heads nodding, so.
Yes,
Yes.
that's fine.
Okay.
So one of the questions for you is, would you like a continuance to provide that information, and possibly submit revised plans?
If the drive-through is not approved by the state, we would still like to keep it as a loading thoroughfare, a loading aisle, so that the plan could remain as it is for that regard, for the site planning portion of it, right? And if the state doesn't approve it, then it doesn't become a drive-through. It's a loading lane.
Yeah, and perhaps with the revised plans we've been discussing, obviously they would address lighting and a number of other issues that people were talking about. They could address, what would this look like if not a drive-through? What more description about what it would, what it would be used for, and how exactly that would operate.
Because it will be a loading lane.
It would
It's already going to be with a driveway.
We would keep it as such, right? So,
Okay.
because otherwise, how do we move?
It's always a okay.
Yeah, it would be.
You just don't stop at that window.
It would be a loading lane then to be utilized for Starbuds, like we were kind of talking earlier, like we've done on other properties where, again, like the banks, for instance, right? They have the drive-through at the bank. It's not being utilized right now. Now it's a little bit of different circumstance in the fact that that's off of the parking lot. This is kind of off the side of the building. But we also have to be aware too that we have a lot of landscaping on that east end. You probably won't even be able to see the fact that it's a lane there. So with the banks, same situation, that's not being utilized right now, but they are utilizing that path to get into that drive-through pickup as a way to make their deliveries, to make the deliveries to the facility. So that's why what my thought is that if, or to move forward in some way, we look at the site as it is and say that, that would be a loading aisle, right? For the dispensary, and that would remain as it's shown for both ways, right? So if it's a dispensary, it gets utilized as a drive-through. If we can't use the drive-through and the state doesn't approve it, it would be a loading way with obviously minimal traffic there. The other elements we obviously can touch base on and work on those to appease everyone's requests here. and look further into that, lighting, so things like that.
So you're comfortable with the continuous
I
use
am,
map?
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the items too, since there's site plan review is one of the three, we have to receive your permission to continue the review of the site plan as well. So we have
You do,
permission.
correct.
Great.
Yep.
All right. That said, would anyone like to make a motion to continue the petition to the July 24th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting?
Motion to continue somewhat at the, convenience is the wrong word, but at the schedule of the petitioner, because I don't know if July is enough time to look at everything in time. So if this happens to go till
July 24th, is that, I know that we got a lot of holidays between now and then. Is that enough time? Do you want to go into August?
July 24th.
Is-
July 24th is okay.
And since we're talking about three separate items, do we need three separate motions for that?
You can do one motion for, just, this motion relates to items PZ 24005, PZ 24007, and PZ 24008,
motion to bundle all of them.
and continue to July 24th.
All right, does we have a motion?
Second.
Is there seconds? All right, and please call the roll.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Marhold?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right. Don't believe we have any old business on the agenda. Does anyone have, I'm sorry, we have the new item for
Let's
discussion.
pick that for next time.
Well, we don't need to have the discussion here, but could you please introduce what it is in general that you'd like us to talk about in the future?
Sure, just real briefly, the Parks and Rec signs that went up in the public parks for the last couple of weeks. I was surprised, and I didn't know this, that the Planning and Zoning Commission has no purview or any authority or even any recommendation authority over government-installed signs, so signs installed by the village or presumably the county, and I guess the state and the feds too, but I'm really more concerned about the village. So I would just like to just kind of kick that around, like, is this something we could ask the village board to give us at least some input into them? And that's all I'm interested in doing.
All right, so we'll think
The
about
only new
that.
sign I've noticed is that there's one at Harrington when you come in that street, and there's something about public permit, or how do you get a permit? Is that the kind of
They're in
sign
every
you're
park.
talking
They're in
about?
every
Oh, those are,
Yeah.
they put those in
They're
every
large
park?
signs in every park.
Okay, because I just
Yeah.
noticed it
Yeah.
in that location, but that's the ones you're talking about.
Yes, the
specifically
great
right
big
now.
signs with a million rules.
Such as the one at the entrance to Swan Pond?
Yes, yes.
Just
I haven't
making
seen
sure
that.
I'm
Yeah.
talking about
Those are the
the,
ones.
yeah.
I haven't seen those, I just saw them.
All right, so we'll talk about that next month.
Could I have a point for information before you adjourn, and I understand?
We're
you want to?
just getting information right now. Does anyone have any information
do.
they'd like to share?
I do. If you would please, Ethan Soul, who's our village clerk, did remind me that please submit your sexual harassment training to him. He's hoping to get it done by July 1st, but if you could do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that you get an email if you haven't received one.
Just
Thanks.
Sure.
For clarification on the last matter, are we, staff, going to be able to provide us with any more information regarding traffic counts or safety of that, drive-through lane, if it's used as a drive-through lane, and what their expectations are for the amount of, at some point, sometimes it sounded like they thought there'd be a lot of use of that drive-through lane. But, there are times when that area is quite congested, when there's a train there, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I mean, I would appreciate having some better numbers on that. And as that gets backed up, then the cars in that drive-through lane are going to get backed up. And they're going to try and squeeze in and get in front of people that are just trying to get through Burlington to get to wherever they're going to pick their kids up at school or whatever.
Well, sure, they're just knowing what their projected usage would be.
Yeah, and
Projected
how
usage
congested
would
is
be
that really?
okay,
How
but-
congested is Burlington right there at certain points of the day?
Anecdotally, it's worse in the morning than it is in the afternoon. I take the train from Harlem every day.
I think we
So it's, morning is when it gets really, but
Projected.
afternoon
It's not like afternoon, like 3:30 or 4, not so much? or-
4:30 or something, that's never that bad.
projected numbers would be great, but I also caution that it's a disaster no matter what, which is why the state is looking at a study on Harlem Avenue to try and address some of those problems. So I would argue that this structure is far from the biggest problem right there.
Well, when they were, that Pace Pulse Service a couple years ago, they had brochures on that, and they showed that exact intersection
Yes.
in their cover page or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know how realistic that was, because if they have a Pace Pulse
There,
bus lane there, and then you've got
there is currently a.
There should be an underpass.
There's a study right
There's a stu-
now to
that they're
look at
doing?
that
There is
underpass.
actually being
Yes,
done?
the state
Okay.
allocated multiple millions of dollars, I can't quite remember, and might remember,
I do not know.
to study the entire corridor from, I think, Delaplane all the way down to Oak Park Avenue, or
Okay.
maybe even
Yes.
Stanley.
Okay.
So
If there's an
It's-
underpass there, you're not going to have
it's a bigger issue
Burlington.
than what we're looking at.
Okay, all right.
If you ask my 6-year-olds, they will tell you that if you say Harlem is, they will say the worst. So, yes.
Okay, thank you.
To the extent that we can get information from Starbuds on the projected number of folks who'll be driving through there and any other opinions that the traffic engineer has about the safety and functioning of that, I will provide it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other information? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.